Good morning, everyone. Magic time has arrived and it's 9:30. So welcome everybody, elected members and staff. Mayor Tracy, would you like to open with the karakia, please?
Ko ranganui ki ronga, ko papatuanu ki kiraro, ko tātou ta ira tangata, ki wanganui te hei Māori ora. Sky Father above, Mother Earth below, all of us in the middle, breath of life. Morena.
Thank you. We don't actually have technically we don't have an apology for Councillor Peter Johns, who's online, so no apologies. No public forum. Are there any items that are not on the agenda? No, excellent. There conflicts. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest in relationship to decisions to be made for this meeting? There are none noted. Confirmation of our minutes held 29th of April. Can I have a mover that they be confirmed as a true and accurate record, please? Mayor Tracy, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mike. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Moving on to our reports. Our first report, item 7.1. Mr. Chief Executive, our financial risk incident. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair, Mayor and Councillors. I'll take the report as read, just noting that the report has been prepared for me largely by staff, including our legal counsel. Just really happy to take any questions on it, but you'll note the report does highlight that there was quite a lot of due diligence taken regarding the previous loan to Pukaha, well, the current loan to Pukaha, and that security was an item discussed at the time, but noting because of the business that Pukaha is, they don't have any realisable assets, which made it very difficult to take security at the time, which was discussed during the meeting. However, as per the request from councillors, we were asked to prepare a report in terms of the process around it, and as I mentioned, happy to answer any questions relating to this.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions? I'm sure there's one or two. Who's going to start off for 10? Oh, Councillor Mike, thank you.
Through you, Chair. Just a query. I thought that the repayments on interest after the third year were 3 monthly. Is that incorrect?
Yeah, through the Chair, the repayments were a fixed amount for that entire financial year. I think each year has an end, the required payment by October. I'm not aware of it being on a 3 monthly basis. I'm looking across to some of the staff. Just annually.
Thank you. Councillor Scott and Councillor Sharon.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I have quite a few questions, so I'll run through some of those.
Run them all, right, and then hopefully subject across these off as well.
Perfect. Sounds good to me. My first one's just more of a technical nature in the recommendation that asks us to adopt this report, which seems sort of slightly different terminology to what we have. We usually receive an information report, but I'm just wondering what we are adopting in this case.
Through Chair, yeah, point taken. I think you can just put a full stop after the received.
Thanks very much. Brian, through you, Mr. Chair. A number of questions I'm going to ask will probably be slightly familiar because they're based off an email I sent through to you and the Mayor on the 23rd of May, which I had some questions answered by Mayor Tracy. But my first question there is, in the loan agreement, there was a requirement to provide quarterly reports through to council. Has this consistently happened throughout the loan? And did this have any governance oversight?
Through the chair, so no. The answer to that is no, those reports weren't provided. We did receive the annual reports related to that. In terms of governance oversight, I'm not too sure. There was nothing agreed around how that would come back to council for oversight, so I doubt it.
Thanks very much, and through you, Chair Phillip. In the investigations, I know this is the initial sort of view, and it's a good report, by the way, so thank you. Did we get an understanding of why those quarterly reports may not have been followed up if they were contractually expected?
So we didn't. The investigation didn't branch out to Pukaha in terms of talking to them about why they weren't provided to us at that point. I do note that that council also has a role to play to ensure that these reports were received, but fundamentally, I won't say that. So no, the reports we have not received any information, me personally or anyone else, why they weren't sent. I'm guessing it was an oversight.
Thanks very much, Brian. I think I was more looking for if we've understood from our perspective why they weren't requested or followed up. So the contract was really clear that we would be expecting those quarterly reports. So this is more from a risk perspective of looking at our controls of if we agree something in a contract and it doesn't come through, if we've got a better understanding of why perhaps that wasn't followed up. And this is in light of perhaps other contracts we have. I'm just very curious about our monitoring.
So I think what point to note is that this was probably outside the norm of council business in terms of what we do on a regular basis. Our grant funding, which is highlighted in the report, we didn't have a policy around that, which would stipulate on how they would be reported back. Technically, even though this wasn't a grant, it would fall under the same sort of criteria as that. Our funding, other funding that we are provided, it's stuff that council's used to doing. So I see that they would have provided those reports, and we do have officer oversight over the grant funding. In terms of that contract and making sure that all of those put in place, certainly was an oversight.
Thanks very much for that, Brian. My next question was the loan agreement requires an early warning notification to council. Noting that we did receive some information according to the report in March 2025, wondering if we received any notification of challenges that Pukaha had prior to March, and if so, how was it escalated?
Through the chair, so no, that was my first notification as of that March meeting of any financial hardships that Pukaha was facing.
Thanks for that, Brian. Thanks, Mr. Chair. In the risk mitigation section of the officer report, it specifically talks as one of the mitigations about track record. Noting that it has been made very, very clear to us through the papers and also through some other representations that the agreement was just between the Pukaha Trust Board and Council and no other parties. Whose track record was that mitigation referring to? Was it just the Pukaha Trust Board or was it someone else? I'd say just the trust.
The agreement was just with the trust, so therefore the mitigation would have been with the Pukaha Trust Board.
Thanks very much for that, Brian. Just my next question, as I went through the report, I tried to read the report as if I was a councillor making a decision on it, and that's really difficult to do without the benefit of hindsight. So what we know now obviously can impact on that. One bit that jumped out at me was the officer advice that the loan wouldn't trigger the significance and engagement policy. So what I want to understand is whether risk of non-payment, which is flagged in the officer report, was factored into the significance and engagement analysis.
Through you, Chair, it's probably a question I can't answer because at the time that was obviously done with an officer that's no longer working for council, but through my experience, I still don't believe it would have triggered the significance and engagement policy at that time. Remembering, yes, hindsight, now you think, look back, it's easy to say due to what's happened now that it may have done, but certainly all the information at the time, the financial viability of Pukaha, the support that they also have and still continue to have, did not trigger the significant engagement policy as per that report.
Thanks very much, Brian. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am trying to be very careful just to keep my questions and comments related to the paper, and I think I've made my views on some of the other bits clear. So I'll just finish. My final question is a bit of a moving forward question. So do we have any other external agreements with a monitoring component built in with them, which this did have a monitoring component with the quarterly reports, but do we have any other external agreements that have a monitoring component? And if so, how are those tracked and what oversight may we have as a committee to those agreements to make sure that those obligations are being met?
Through you, Chair, I mean, every agreement we have, whether it be for a grant or a contract or whatever, so we have literally, dozens of agreements with external parties to either deliver services or to provide grant funding, and it is a massive role of staff that have to monitor all these. Do we actively monitor every single one of them? It's very difficult to do that, so quite often if it's when something does go wrong, then we go back and have a look at it. But I think if you're talking about specific grant funding type agreements, then we certainly do. So as mentioned in the report, we have implemented a contestable fund grant policy, so that does have the oversight over that. We don't have any other loans to any other organisation, so that takes that out. Sorry, we do, but that's connected to the Pukaha. But in relation to anything else like that, absolutely, we have good monitoring processes. And I think this one here was something different to what Council has done previously, relating to actually issuing the loan out at that point. So yes, I'm comfortable that for all our other grant type funding, we do have very good monitoring measures in place, as well as our contracts as well. But obviously we have a number of those that happen on that we update on a regular basis.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. A number of my direct questions were addressed by Councillor Scott, but I do want to acknowledge the team for doing some of this navel gazing. I think it's really important. There's certainly a lot of public interest. I was personally challenged just this week around, was I on that council that decided to do what it did with Pukaha? And, under good governance, we accept decisions of previous councils and we honour those and move on. And it's really about moving on. I have a question. Councillor Scott's raised a number of pertinent issues around the monitoring framework and the reporting that hasn't happened, whether or not we might have had some insight or warning way before we did. However, I guess I'm asking the question, it is the role of governors to monitor and to assess the risk. And my question is, through you, Chair Phillip, you may have some insights on this as well. Where is the appropriate forum for us to do that, and what tools can we expect staff to provide us into the future whereby we know, right, this is the time of the year or this is the time of the financial year where we ask those questions. And it goes to a paper that's presented later on by you, Sandy, around a work program, because those are often triggers to us as governors to say, right, this is the time of year where we need to check in or ask, where is the quarterly report, where is the update? And it's finding a mechanism and a framework that allows us as governors to do that. So I'd be interested in your insight, Brian. I'm assuming this is the appropriate committee for that. However, what tools will be in the toolkit going forward that the staff will use to go, wahoo team, we need to ask the question that we've checked in, we've got a report, we know what the status is on when it comes to some of this financial risk. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, through Chair. I think we're specifically talking about the Pukaha loan. At this point, there's been no default or anything gone. So at that point, the only thing that we're monitoring is the issuing of a quarterly report. That's all they had to do. There was no sort of breakdown and go into more detail. That was just providing us with a quarterly report. And admittedly, officers should be ticking that off to say they got it. I don't think it would have made any difference to where we are today if we got those quarterly reports. But I get your question in terms of the oversight regarding any sort of key type matters that carry a higher level of risk. So we do obviously report through a number of things for our annual plan, annual report, quarterly reports, but none of that would have picked this up either. I think it's got to actually drop, you sort of want to drop down to the level to say, actually, have we received the requirements or the agreement as per this loan? And I think in a lot of ways, all that was needed is just the Pukaha loan update. They're meeting the requirements of the agreement as outlined. That's probably as simple as at a governance level that you would need. And if there were quarterly reports provided, it could be we've received the quarterly report from Pukaha and it does show a trend towards some financial pressures. I think that would be the information that you would get that come through something, in my view, and others might have a different view of that. So it's, once again, if the loan was honky-dory and there wasn't any issues, we probably wouldn't be having the conversation now. But there's lessons to be learned, and as with every new process that council undertakes, we won't get everything perfect from the first time, but certainly if there was another case or similar type process, then we would definitely tidy up the reporting aspect of it to ensure that, one, that the agreements were being satisfied through the other party, and maybe just an update through the quarterly financial reports to say the Pukaha loan so far has met all its requirements on track.
Thanks, Chair Brian. It's Brian, Chair Phillip. All sorts of things. Just a comment for a second. I came to the community board meeting yesterday and I was absolutely aghast that a member of the Tūmare Trust was invited. I don't think invitation was probably the right word here. Turned up, we've had presentations to the council, we've had reports done, we've had meetings, and out of the blue, they turned up here, and I was staggered with that, quite frankly. But I'll just leave it at that because it's. But more importantly, and it just referred to it had some concerns. I was on the council that approved the loan, and at the time, it was fairly rigorously considered and we talked about it, and there was concerns. Some of these concerns today we had then, but we persuaded and we did what we did. But just as far as these quarterly reports, I look back at the annual report, the last annual report from Pukaha Board, Trust Board, and there was lots of things in that. What there wasn't in it was any concerns about finances. Absolutely not. And also on that board there was two appointed board members from Tūmarae Trust Board. I think they'd been on it for some time. And so it was interesting that up until March, as the comment of Brian's date mentioned, there hadn't been any early warnings really from Tūmarae Trust and the board itself, and we had other relationships with members on that board outside Tūmarae Trust's board. Some of those people we were involved with in other areas, and it was just, it seemed to me, I looked at the two and I looked at the debt, but there wasn't, we didn't have a breach, but there was other loans. There was Tūmarae Trust had a loan, they had advanced money, Westpac Bank and the electricity. There was enough, and there was no, it was amazing the flags didn't go up, and even they avoided it. The manager of the board made comment, and then also the chairperson. So it was just, it all happened rather late and all of a sudden. And as you said, hindsight's a great thing. So I'm not trying to get us off the hook or anyone. The quarterly reports weren't done perhaps. Well, they weren't done full stop, but there was no real major flags popped up. So just the people that now we're dealing with here, or dealing with a loaner, were on that committee as well. But there has been lots and lots of Facebook discussion and on the street discussion, and it was, I think, all the facts weren't probably exactly as they are, but just some comments really. Thanks.
Is there a question in there? That was a statement?
Just a statement, yes. And just a comment about the community board's involvement.
Councillor Mike?
Through you, Chair. Just the red flag that was made aware to me was when the contestable fund was applied for $12,000 for the CEO's wages. That straight away told me that there was an issue there somewhere, and I voted accordingly as some other councillors. The question I have is, on page 15, 6.2, you're talking about the Local Government Act 2002. Was this loan also covered in the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act 2003?
Through Chair, we can't answer that. We would need to take advice.
I've got probably, Mayor Tracy?
Thanks, Chair Philip. I guess the question I've got really, and not to labour on around the reporting aspect, but you know, in the risk assessment, it is listed 6 times that quarterly reporting aspect of it, and there were some red flags that they may not have indicated some of the trouble, but they would have led to the further questions around, you know, the fundraising steering committee. Had that been set up, it would have highlighted, you know, had the marketing manager been appointed, and some of those things. My question is, you know, with that being such a prominent feature, what system and process has changed to reflect that in anything further that we do?
Through Chair, there won't be currently any other loans that sort of have this same process, and I think I covered the question regarding, but in terms of those risk assessments, certainly we'll be looking at what sort of monitoring is in place regarding that, and obviously there's learnings to take from this process. I still go back to what I said earlier in terms of, yes, you might have been asked all those questions, but our ability to do really anything at that point still remains as limited. But as I've mentioned already, we will take the learnings from this, and if there are anything similar in the future or anything currently that we need to look into, I'm sure there's enough staff around the tables to ensure that they have a look in that around those processes. But we do monitor stuff, and as we mentioned before, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and there's a lot of that sort of going on right now, I believe. Did you want to?
Oh, yeah. Can I add? Just really quickly, so twice a year there was a measurement point for Pukaha, and that's leading into the annual plan and the numbers that were required. That was then kept you informed as council, and the other is the annual report, which has to be held up to scrutiny, which the auditors do check the asset value and reasonableness of that asset value. So those two things happen at different times in the year. So you can say that at least twice a year there was actual reporting that came back and was done in a formal manner. But then there were likely to be informal discussions that led up to that between the CFO and the board in some capacity. What I don't know is how that was documented. That was all.
Any more questions? I've just got, so look, I agree that we're actually looking back with hindsight, which is always 20/20 vision, right? So we've got to just be careful that our glasses aren't tinted with that 20/20 vision when things were a little bit, when you're looking at forecasts, it's always going to be a bit blurry. But I've got a couple of questions here, and I just want to focus on page, where are we, 28 of the agenda. And to me is, for my sins in a previous life, I had to do significant cash flow forecasting to go to banks and other organisations. And when I looked also at the papers that were provided back in the council report, I couldn't see any evidence of any forecasts that were provided by the board in supporting the application. So the question I have, were there any forecasts, maybe I should have asked, I was going to ask you this yesterday, but I ran out of time. Were there any forecasts that you're aware of that supported the application? Because one of the issues that we're facing is that did they actually have the forecast and from income to repay the debt? Now, if you look at the risk assessment, there was a risk about default, and yes, there was some sensitivity undertaken, but I couldn't see where that detail was actually provided to council on that sensitivity.
Morena, it looks like it's me. Thank you. To answer your first question, yes, there were forecasts that were provided. So if my memory serves me correctly, Pukaha came to council as part of our long-term plan, might have been an annual plan, and they were requesting, I feel like it was $1 million grant from us at that point. They did a presentation in a workshop setting which had all of the business case and everything for what they were trying to deliver. The officers determined on the day that the workshop setting wasn't the most appropriate place for that decision to occur, in which case that's when the June 2021 paper came to council. So there is Excel spreadsheets that us little people love. Up the wazoo would be a really nice way to put it. So happy to share that if that is helpful at some point in time, but yes.
So that was prepared. Who prepared it was Pukaha's forecast of how they would, okay, all right. And I think that's probably the lesson learned, right? That, if we're, technically we're a bank, right? So do we actually, when we've got some debt outstanding, do we actually monitor, say, you said you were going to have this amount of cash coming in, you've got X, how are you going to manage, just as a lesson going forward? And one of the other things that I think is a lesson learned, and whether you want to comment on it, if you look again on page 28, we've got one of the mitigations there, the funding raising strategy, right? And for those of you who were around in 21, 22 on boards that were looking at funding, my experience, certainly, right, was that funding was pretty tight. So, and that to me is, again, I think, whether you agree, I think I need a nod of the head, as part of that strategy going forward. If we do get one of these, we need to learn from our challenges that we've had along the way, right? and that we actually need to sort of almost have a lessons learned or observed paper. So if we get another funding application that requires a loan, right, then we need to say is what are the things we need to consider so we avoid, right, don't mitigate this happening again. But I think the good news is we actually haven't lost our capital, right? That is actually, some other councils have actually lent funds to other organisations for commercial purposes, and those commercial purposes are really struggling at the moment, right? I won't mention names, but there are other councils in a similar position. Councillor Steve.
Thank you, Chair Philip. On page, it's funny, I was looking at page 20 up, but across the page on 29, you'll see a grant or a suspensory loan. I did an independent paper and we had a look at this, and I circulated it out to most of the councillors. And this is going in now time, not hindsight time. Because where I sit at the moment, the way I look at it, with what the offer is on the table at the moment, I don't agree with it now in principle, because you're basically getting $1 million less the interest payment, where if that party wants to get involved, the Mount Bruce Pukaha needs money, they could put $1 million in and that would help their cause. And then we could, I worked it out, it's about 0.3% rate going forward, because the thing that scares me, and this is not hindsight, this has already happened once, what's going to happen in 10 years' time? We could be sitting around, well, not us, the people that are in this table, in 10 years' time, the can could be kicked along the road, and here we are again. We've got no guarantees. It's scary stuff.
Through the chair, so the new loan will have security.
I haven't seen it.
Yep, that item will still be coming to council, and that's what we're negotiating. But a bottom line for council was security, and Tumaita Trust are aware of that.
Yeah, because I think we've got to look at this really carefully, and what the biggest thing here is Mount Bruce needs money. That's the bottom line. We've already given them the money. We've already learnt that, the way it's set up, and to be respectful to the sitting council at the time in the situation. Fine, they thought they made the right decision. But I think we can't make two wrong decisions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions, any further comments? Councillor Scott, thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this relatively brief and try and keep it focused to what we're talking about today. And I did mention the word hindsight, and I don't regret using that, by the way, because actually I think that that's our role now, to be looking at this with hindsight, to try and work out what perhaps we might have done differently with the knowledge that we now have. When I went through the loan, as I mentioned before, I tried to do that as if I was a councillor at the table, but with the benefit of the knowledge that we have now. As I was running through that paper, I wrote all over it high risk. It felt high risk, even though it wasn't framed necessarily in that way, because of now we know what we know. So this is not a criticism to other councillors who didn't have that benefit. But when we look at $1 million for our ratepayers, which is what was at risk, that was approximately $50,000 per resident. Like, it is a huge, huge, huge amount of money for people. It took $1 million, divided it by our population. So, look, if I've got that wrong, it's still a large amount of money. I'll double check my figures. Yeah, sorry, I will double check my figures. But fair enough. But my point remains, it is still a very, very large sum of money to be giving out. In the paper, it talked about one of the one of the risks that should have been raised was the loss of government support. My understanding is this is not necessarily what caused the problem for Pukaha. Some of it goes down to what the chair was talking about, the fundraising strategy and the forecasting figures not matching the reality of what happened. And this really goes to us, as Chair Phillip talked about, essentially acting as a bank in this situation. And I think one of our biggest learnings from this needs to be that we're not a bank and we don't have the expertise that a bank would have when it comes to judging a loan. And I hope that's something that stays front of mind for us, because I've worked in a bank. I understand that it isn't just about making a decision. There are huge processes and different lending criteria that a bank goes through to be making those decisions, and that is something that we are not, that we don't have the expertise in. So I thank staff very, very much for coming up with this report. I think it is actually quite helpful for the public to be able to see it all laid out in one place, because I agree there is some incorrect information floating around, and at least this is a place that we can point people to be able to see the story from start to finish. So I'm grateful for that team. Thank you.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Gilmore. Just want to make one minor point that the bank did issue a loan to Pukaha 2 years after council provided that, so closer to probably where their troubles were more involved. So I'm just saying that so there were a lot of conversations between council, and it is even difficult for myself to go back and review all the items, but around that is probably, you know, hours and hours of conversations that occurred that's not documented as well. So those are the hard things to, and I do remember there were some really robust discussions around the table. And there was and in fact, officers had to go away and provide further information, continue working with the general manager there and the board. And as noted in the report, initially it was an interest-free loan, and we went away and done some more work. And security as well was obviously topical. So there was a lot of hours of discussion when the decision was made. I can't comment, that's, you know, hindsight again, if the decision was right. But what I can say, from an officer perspective, we provided a wealth of information and worked closely with the board and the manager, and had a lot of involvement from the elected.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Steve, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Phillip. Yeah, I did actually put another email out called "We're being used as a bank" around the members too. So it's quite good that we're on a parallel thought here, because we're not a bank. And because there are other things that are coming out from underneath the rock, and that's really good, because that's what we want to see and make sure we're transparent. And I won't mention the other issue that they've assured me that's happening this month, but that's an issue that I want to make sure that we don't become a bank, because we're a council of governance.
Thank you. Anything further? So do I have a mover for the recommendation with the suggestion that after the word "received" we put a full stop and don't do "and adopted"? So it's Councillor Scott, seconded Councillor Sharon. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. We've got a wee way to go yet. So our next item is 7.2 on page 69, the Taurua Alliance Audit Risk Committee report. Thank you, Dan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mayor Tracy and councillors. I'm conscious that I didn't speak at the last Audit Risk Committee meeting, so I'll talk through the report, and if there's any questions, then please sing out. So starting in the zero harm space, so the graph there is just showing how we've been tracking over the last financial year relating to our medically treated injuries, first aid injuries and so on. As you see, we are in a good space. We have had a few medical treated injuries that came through in May related to slips and falls. So, first aid injuries. So very, very minor injuries, and all employees are still fit and at work. So no issues there. One area of improvement that has been raised through the PG group, and you can see on that graph, is in around our near-miss reporting. So still a bit of a struggle to get near-miss reporting come through. We know that it's not a case that it's not happening. It's just a case of getting reports through so that we can see trends and try and obviously put preventative actions in place to ensure that those near misses don't lead to any incidents. Just going through to page 70. So health and safety conversations, inspections and audits from the management team. So since January, you see that we've had an upward trend in regards to having the teams go out and do inspections and audits on the teams out in the field to ensure that that all the right risk management controls are in place. So yeah, in a good space there. Just going through to the performance framework. So this update is the last quarterly update for the 24-25 financial year. So this is an internal audit, so we still have the external performance audit to be carried out for last financial year, which we're looking at currently booking at the moment. But in regards to our internal audit, you'll see that the overall score is showing as a 3.3 out of 5, which is an improvement to the 23-24 score, which is good news. So in 23-24, our score was 2.77, so there's been an increase, which shows we're obviously heading in the right direction as far as making improvements that are required. Just talking to a little bit to how the score is looking. So you'll see in the purpose, vision and strategy space, we are achieving in that space, but just still a little bit of work to try and get some improvements there. We have changed some of the KPI scoring in that area. So the previous scores was around frequencies of strategy or leadership meetings. So how often the principals group are meeting, how often the ALT, the Alliance Leadership Team, are meeting. So to ensure that we got more output and actual progress being made, is that we change the KPIs relating to the actions that have come from those meetings and whether those actions are being completed within the due date. So yeah, a bit more tension against those KPIs. Stakeholder perceptions area. So one of the KPIs that has let this area down in regards to the scoring was the timeliness of our target cost estimates approval. So in the 24-25 financial year, our target cost estimates weren't approved until February. So a good way through the year before they were set in place. We did keep the proposed target cost estimates the same throughout the year in good faith, as we wanted to make sure that we were scoring accurately against what we thought we were going to score at the start of the year. And just in regards to making improvements to that, for this financial year, we've already had our target cost estimates approved, so we are in a much better space this year in regards to knowing what our basically targets are for the year in that area. So just to put that into context, our KPI is to have them signed off by end of September, so to have them signed off in July is good news. And we continue to show that we're doing well in the organisation culture leadership space, so just ensuring that we're celebrating successes and recognising staff for going the extra mile to ensure we keep the culture in a good space in the Alliance. At the last Audit Risk Committee meeting I did speak with, there was just a bit of feedback regarding providing some information in regards to what's been talked about at the Principals Group meeting. So we've got in the report just some trends of what was discussed. So starting with succession planning. So over the last few years, we have seen we've got quite a lot of good succession stories really of staff, working their way through their career within the Alliance itself to new roles and moving up. So that's good news. However, what that has done is sort of left a bit of a gap in regards to having people to continue to backfill these positions without having to look too far externally. So the PG group was discussed with the PG group as a bit of a risk for us, and to make sure that we're putting good succession planning in place for our staff within the Alliance to continue to grow them, to be prepared to take that next step if it comes. In the zero harm space, so we did have quite a significant trend in driving accidents previous to last financial year. But over the last year, we have seen some great improvement in that space. So we only had one quite significant accident last financial year, right at the start of the year. But apart from that, there was no significant accidents in 24-25. A lot of that was put down to we set up a zero harm leadership committee to making sure that we are putting good initiatives in place to continue to promote good zero harm controls and initiatives to ensure that those accidents don't continue to happen. So put it down to that. And then you'll see if you go through to page 72, the alliance strategy, the 3-year strategy. So I believe you've seen this before, but just in September last year, the PG group, the alliance leadership team, and the council executive leadership team caught up and did a workshop in regards to putting together a 3-year strategy for the alliance. We found that the existing strategy had served its purpose, and we needed to get it updated. So you see the new strategy there. Essentially, it's got a strategic priority, so those are our strategic priorities over the next 3 years. The contributors are our focus areas annually, which we can update just based on how we're tracking against those focus areas. And then the key measures is to show that we are achieving what we're set out to achieve, and those key measures are related to the performance framework. The ISO accreditation, so one of the key measures is around achieving our asset management maturity score, which I've shown in this committee in the past in regards to how we're scoring in that space. That is a downer audit, so it is an internal audit. So one discussion that we're having is whether we replace that with achieving an ISO accreditation. So just that's been sent to the principals group at the moment for review. So that's an external audit, and essentially it audits us on whether we have good asset management practices in place. So yeah, that's yet to be determined about whether we're going to go ahead with that. Team structure and overhead. So we put together, the Alliance reviewed its structure back in April 2024. That was to increase resource to help with the Cyclone Gabrielle response. It did come a little bit later than we would like, but it did help us get additional resource to deliver on that work. But obviously that work is slowing down. So the last 2 years we've delivered up to $30 million of work in that space. And this year we're looking at around 10 million. So yeah, obviously quite a significant reduction in that work. So since that structure changed till now, when through just natural staff changes and things like that, we have reviewed whether we replace vacant roles or whether we could repurpose those positions. So in that, there's been 6 positions that we haven't filled from that structure, just to try and obviously save costs where we can. That has caused a little bit of angst within the team just around a lot of the changes that have been happening. So there are a couple more changes that we'd like to make to ensure that we're being proactive in that space. But yeah, it'll be good to, once we make the last few changes that we want, to get a bit more consistency and reassurance to the team. So yeah, we'll make sure that we're communicating with them. TC and overhead sign-off, so that was already discussed regarding getting those TCs signed off in a timely manner, which we have done going into this financial year. And lastly, for PG, sorry? Conscious of time?
Yes.
Yep.
Carry on where we're going, then we get to 2:00.
Yep, no worries. All right, so I'll take the risk report for read if you like, and if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask.
Thank you. Councillor Sharon and Councillor Scott.
I'll try to keep them direct, but there are a number of parts in your report, Dan, that I'd really like to comment on or have a question. In your section around stakeholder perception at the start, it's a shame that some people, including the community board yesterday, still don't get what the Alliance is about. And so, you know, I think marketing and trying to change perception, even with just stakeholders, but also with the community, must be an ongoing challenge for you. ISO accreditation, I concur. It's an expensive exercise. Are there any other benchmarks? I mean, given that the Alliance has been party to at least 2 awards in the last 6 months, are there any other external benchmarking that frameworks that could be utilised rather than a whole hog ISO accreditation program?
Through you, Chair. There is the Transport Insights tool, NZTA's basically reporting tool on reports on a whole lot of various things. So for us, one report that comes through, which we've already got as a key measure anyway, is around meeting our NRTP targets. So achieving our renewal programs and the quantities that we're looking at achieving in that space. But apart from that, I don't have any that comes to mind.
Chair, it's worthwhile ensuring that we do have a quality framework like ISO accreditation around, but I concur it's a very expensive and complicated exercise. My next question is around the PG membership changes that have happened and are about to happen. What is the plan to replace our temporary TDC chief executive after the 1st of August? The reason I ask that is it's a really critical function in our oversight role to have that mix in that group. So do we have a plan?
Good morning, Chair Phillip and Mayor Tracy and councillors. I thought I'd jump in and as one of the board members, yes, we're looking at the CFO role to come in again, just to provide that sort of, I guess, financial acumen across the board from the council perspective. So that will happen once Brian moves on and our new CFO starts. Just to add to that, the ISO question, I did have a couple of little perspectives on there too. The Alliance are actually very close to achieving the ISO accreditation, so the amount of, I guess, internal effort isn't huge. It's more the getting someone to come in and do the assessment, which isn't too unreasonable either. And we're on the board, we're discussing where those costs sit, because it is a benefit to Downer to have an ISO accreditation on one of their contracts as well. So it's not entirely a council burden at this stage. So that's why we haven't quite decided, because we're just trying to figure out how that balance could be set.
In your last paragraph, Dan, you referred to that the network itself is generally in good condition and well managed, although there are some areas that you've reflected on. The current average ceiling and rehab rates are very low. And my question stems to perhaps wider than that. In recent times, I've been travelling a lot of the rural network out towards the coast at night, and it's extremely noticeable at night, the line marking and the lack of it. In fact, coming back from Makatio the other night, I went down a gravel road thinking that's where the road went. Now, and I hadn't been drinking, I wish to point out to my colleagues. My question is, the line marking program, is that dependent on a new seal being put in, or is there a time frame around which, if the seal is still okay, but the line marking has disappeared, is there a program in place? What's the time on that? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So just in regards to the situation that you're referring to, is the existing line marking on that section of road?
Yeah, there is,
Yep.
but you can hardly see it.
Yep. So the line marking, so we're going to do an annual remark this year, but we are trying to target where we do that line marking. In the past, we would do the whole network full reline mark, including areas that don't need it. So at the moment, we're looking at doing a more targeted program approach to try and save on doing areas that don't, which has potentially led to going too far the other way and not marking areas that need to be marked. So we'll definitely take that back and review our program to make sure we're picking up on that. One bit of feedback that we got on the previous NZTA audit was where there's roads that have no line marking at all, and then we've gone and done rehab and then put line marking on the rehab but left the rest, and the feedback was, that's creating inconsistency on that section of road, so we're mindful of that as well.
My questions have been asked. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Phillip. When you mentioned we signed it off in July instead of September, we got it done earlier, what changed?
Through you, Chair, so with the notice that we've put in place this year, we've actually got conditions within the notice just to ensure that if there's any potential changes through, for example, the financial audit, so financial auditor will audit our labour rates, our plant rates and things like that. Generally, we would wait until that audit has been completed to ensure that there's no mistakes been made to the rates and that they need to be adjusted, because then that would adjust the target cost estimates. So the condition that we've got in this notice is that once the audit is completed, if there is a change that needs to be made, then the target cost estimates can be adjusted to match that change. So it's just including those conditions now to ensure that we can essentially just move on with it, because it's very unlikely that they will have any changes.
Yeah, no, I was a bit confused there because I'm thinking something's changed and I don't know what it is. Thanks.
Any more questions? Tracy?
Thanks, Chair Philip. Dan, I just wanted to go the Communities at Risk Register when it talks about our urban intersections. I know that we took quite a bit of flack when we did the two intersections here in Dannyburg. Are you actively looking at the others, and is there any communications that we can put out to talk about that and talk about those plans? Because it's not a great stat, and I know that we do also have horizons with road safety that might be able to help in some of that space.
Through Chair Phillips, so with this NRTP period, obviously safety improvement works was not approved in this NRTP period. So with the feedback that we've had through this audit, we are working at putting a more targeted safety program business case forward for the next NRTP period, where we can look at trying to get funding to undertake some of these safety improvements. So any feedback in regard to any particular places would obviously help with putting together that program. One part with that as well is that does include like the State Highway intersection, so we are working more closely with NZTA around safety improvements that they will also be looking at. An example of that is the McLean Street intersection in Woodville, where that recent serious accident happened, so that is included as part of that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've got one, and you've already highlighted it. And I just wanted to sort of, what are the next steps? You're talking about in Para 28, that's succession planning. Unfortunately, I've been aware of some other contracts where the entire leadership group has moved on, right, and hasn't filled, and therefore there was a fall off in the contract performance. So that to me is actually, I'm pleased you've raised it, right? I'm actually looking at Hamish, who's on the principals group. You know, is that something that you are really conscious of as part of the principals group, Hamish?
Thank you for the question, Chair Philip. Yes, absolutely. We've seen the success and people come through, the likes of Matt, the likes of Dan, and they do leave a gap behind, but they're getting better at identifying the gaps and working to fill them. The conversations we're having in the boardroom are who's next, who can we bring up, who's excited about the industry and wants to learn more, and there are people in the teams and lots of locals, which is great. So I think that we've got a good plan of attack ahead, but yeah, it's always a constant risk, you know. The recent example was Blake Headley, he started as a supervisor, worked his way right through, and now he's the delivery manager. So, you know, it's still happening, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but there's also risk. All right, so you've got it, at this stage, you've got it under control?
I believe so.
You believe so. All right, thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Steve, you got one more?
I was just happy to move.
I'm happy to move. Excellent. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Sorry, Sarah. Thank you. Take your report as read. Any key highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Thank you, Chair Philip. Just two comments on this. I just want to acknowledge the Alliance. We have done a substantial amount of capitalisation in this financial year, and it has been significant, the effort they've done to help us with this report and my next one that I'm filling in for Beth. Just really wanted to highlight that. And then the second thing is Ali Dunn has advised us that the adoption of the annual report won't be on that last Wednesday, which I think is maybe the 29th-ish of October, with the change in the elections. All things going well, no recounts. We will be adopting on the 31st of October. All things not going well, should we have a recount, we will adopt as soon as practically possible. Any questions?
Thank you. Wow, no questions. Well done. Nice.
Thank you,
Might
Chair.
have some more questions to the next one, but that's all right. So can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? My goodness, got hands all over the place. Go Steve and Councillor Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Item 7.4. Must that little rev up I did about going till 2 o'clock. Must have given. Right. Revaluation. Next item 7.4, page 83 of the agenda. Thank you, Sarah, again.
No comments from me, just take questions.
Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Sarah, for the update. Huge amount of work, obviously, goes into revaluation, so a short report, but huge amount of work. Can you help me understand, I know that we talk about this a fair bit, but our cycle for revaluations, because I know how much time and how much work and how much strain that can put on the team. I was having a bit of a look, Office of the Auditor General guidelines of needing to do it at least every 5 years, 3 to 5 being the standard. Is that the cycle we're following, or because of our auditing requirements are we having to do that more?
Excellent question. So I'm going to break it down because there's multiple revaluations that we do. So the infrastructure valuation, which this report is specific to, we do annually. Other councils do a 3-year full revaluation, and in the other years they do a fair value assessment. We, in the past, have been burnt, would be my best way to describe it, by a fair value assessment. So we continue to do the annual ones just because of our unit rates and our uniqueness that sort of hits our council. We generally, I don't want to jinx it, it goes smoother with our auditors and from our experience last year when we do the full reval and we've got the supporting documentation and everything behind it. I would say from last year we've come into our rhythm. We lost quite a few significant members of staff that were involved in this process, and we've just getting our rhythm again would be the best way to describe it. Land and buildings are revalued every 3 years, and outside of that, a fair value or a material adjustment assessment is done externally. That comes at a cost of maybe $3,000 compared to a full reval of our land and building, which is a lot more than $3,000. I don't know the figure off the top of my head. Have I answered your question?
And thanks, Sarah, because I suppose the purpose of my question is knowing that some of this is done by external people, knowing that there's a huge amount of time and work from the finance team, but that it comes with a significant cost. I just wanted to make sure that from your perspective we were doing it in the most sensible way. It sounds like you're comfortable with the process as we're going, but it was just for me to better understand it. So thank you.
Councillor Scott, I'm prepared to steps outside of my lane, right? So my experience, doing it every 3 years generally takes a lot of staff time and a lot of resources, and there is a trade-off, right? And I think Sarah's highlighted by doing it on an annual basis, everyone has actually got the right processes, including the valuer, in place. And my experience is, a wee while ago, you might spend, and don't get this wrong, right? You might spend $30,000 on doing a revaluation every 3 years. That's probably way out of date, right? But it makes it easier on Brian. But by doing it on an annual basis, that might only come at a cost of, say, $15,000 because the valuer actually has to do less work. Yes, that's a total of $45,000 compared with $30,000, But then that's an that's going to cost an extra $15,000, but hold on. No. The extra time can be quickly chewed up with Audit New Zealand. Right? I've seen an auditor who wasn't familiar with a revaluation charge an extra $50,000 for reviewing a revaluation. Right? Also, by doing it on an annual basis, staff are familiar with it, so there is a saving in staff costs as well. So to me is yes, while it might appear on the surface to be slightly more expensive, there are other savings elsewhere, right? Right? There's also, right, I know Sarah's going, right, you also don't have to do a fair value assessment as well. So on balance, right, it's probably a good call doing, I'm always a big fan of doing revaluations every year for infrastructure, because what can happen is you get a sudden spike, you do your fair value assessment, and all of a sudden you're then forced to do a revaluation at the last minute, which costs you even more. So, I always, I had a different strategy which has failed, but that's all right. We live and learn. So that to me is my advice to the council. If you're doing it on an annual basis, you've got the budget, keep doing it. Sarah, do you want to add something else that I've forgotten?
I was just going to add that you will have spikes within your depreciation. If you were to leave it for 3 years later, our infrastructure team are forever reviewing and updating our RAM database with any changes in our network. So within the revaluation, you're capturing any of those changes and ensuring that the amount of depreciation that you need to fund in your annual plan, long-term plan, is adequate or at a level where our elected members can make the best decisions available to them.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Scott?
Very full, yes.
And also, can I just say, look, I would not advise a 5-year cycle. I've got one councillor who's on a 5-year cycle, and they've just done a fair value assessment, and they're going to be forced to do a revaluation this year. And it's only year 3. All right, so that's why the Auditor General, well, it's not actually the Auditor General, it's the accounting standards. So the accounting standard says you've got to do it at least every 5 years, or on a basis that frequently ensures that your carrying value is fair. And once you get on that treadmill, it's really hard to get off. All right? Thank you, Sarah. The other question I have is in para 4.13, you're saying the revaluation report is due at the end of the week. We're on track?
As far as I'm aware, yes, we're on track. We had a little slight delay with the capitalisation of our Route 52. It required an additional, I'm so sorry, infrastructure people, site inspection. Understand that's all been completed, and that was the last thing our valuer was waiting on. So at this stage, if it's delayed, it will only be 1 or 2 days, but nothing significant to impact on our timelines that I'm aware of.
Councillor Mike?
Thank you very much for that explanation, all 3, councillor and two members. It really helped me explain, and hopefully some of the ratepayers. But also this valuation, was it roading and 3 waters only?
This one is for our infrastructure network, so it is the roading, the reticulation network, and our treatment assets.
In 2 years' time, will that be passed over to another valuers, or the council won't be involved?
We would still need to conduct a revaluation for our roading network. Yeah.
Any further questions? All right, I'm going to be bold here. I'm going to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Oh, I think Mayor Tracy by a finger. All right, any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. It gets carried. Next item, some bedtime reading, 7.5, our significant expenditure policy. Thank you for some, I was going to say riveting reading, Stephen, but I better hold my breath. All right, thank you. Take your report as read. Is there any key highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee?
Yes, thank you. Morena, everyone. So, Firstly, I'll start with an apology. I'm so sorry that this came through with all of the markup included. I'm not sure how that happened. And right, okay. So just to highlight the reason the policy is in front of you today, it's due for review. And so this is part of our normal review cycle for policies. We've had audit recommendations over quite a number of years around sensitive expenditure and our sensitive expenditure policy. So the hope is that this one here will get that monkey off our back and that we will meet all of the audit recommendations. What I've done here is I've aligned the policy as closely as possible to the Office of the Auditor General guidelines. And the last thing the policy does is amalgamate what we currently have, which is a policy and guidelines, and where what we were finding in practice for our staff is that they didn't always completely align and it made it challenging at times. So other than that, there are no significant changes other than to say we've included in this one a requirement for monitoring, but as yet we haven't established what that monitoring would look like because there's some challenges with our systems and processes around how we could pick up sensitive expenditure to report through to the committee. But that will be something we'll be working on and reporting back at the next meeting. Happy to take any questions.
Very welcome, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the update. And just a note, track changes are really helpful because then we're not having to pull out the old one and try and figure out what's changed. So I certainly encourage that rather than apologising for it. I've just got three quick questions. So my first one's on page 106, 13, council use of private assets. You might be able to answer this really quickly. Elected members are included as being covered by this policy, but obviously we are not staff members. The only reason I wanted to note there is elected members have a different process for our expenses. This talks about a very specific process. This doesn't accidentally capture elected members within that. I just want to double check.
Through the chair, no, that doesn't capture elected members. It's for staff. It applies to staff, yes.
Thanks very much for that, Stephen. My next question was just on page 114, and that was relating to COHA. A good explanation there, but I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to have some guidelines for amounts. It gives descriptions about when it's appropriate. Some of our other areas, staff gifts, as an example, specifically speaks to amounts. Wonder if that is something that could be added as a guideline.
Through the chair, yep, is a good point. Just currently, and it might not be the best place for it, we do have a schedule of fees relating to iwi engagement, etc. That does include koha on that, but it might not be the best place for that. So we take the point maybe somewhere else it could be sitting so it's more accessible to everyone.
More just as a guideline, which would be helpful. Just my final question, Mr. Chair, was page 116, where one of the requirements, it's 23.2, talks about following the asset disposal policy. In a further report, that's still in the work program to develop. So I just wanted to double check, because my understanding is we didn't have a current active one.
Yeah, through you, Chair Phillip. Yeah, sorry. It was expected to bring the policy to this committee, but that's been delayed, and so that has put the sensitive expenditure policy out of sync. So yes, it's currently referring to a policy that is in development. That's correct.
question. Does that impact our ability to adopt the sensitive expenditure policy today because of that reference? Just want to double check. I think it's adopted, it's been added in a similar way to the other report. This is just us endorsing it, so that doesn't impact it. Mr. Chair, sorry, I think it's fine that it's in 1.1, it has received and adopted. We could ignore that. We can still endorse the policy. It's fine. That's.
I've got a few, right? On page 95, we talk about contractors and consultants, right? How are they actually, then when I actually look at the body of the policy, there's no further reference to them, and generally I would say that contractors and consultants generally are not incurring sensitive expenditure. So just wonder how that aligns, right? Do you want me to do all of them, or do you want them one at a time? Okay, yep, thank you.
So this has gone in because we've had situations where in the past we've had particularly consultants fill roles such as finance manager and others where they've had a delegated authority. So that's what that's capturing. So it'd be unusual, but it's to capture every situation.
Okay, thank you. Then my next one is on page 101. We've got prohibited items including the use of fuel, right? Now what happens if your fuel card doesn't work and you don't carry cash, right? How are you supposed to fill up the council vehicle? Maybe that word should be restricted. I have signed off other council laws and other roles where their fuel card hasn't worked, right? Or it's been a rental or something like that. So if it's a prohibited item for the purchase of fuel or oil, it's prohibited.
So that's a long-standing wording that we've had in previous policies, but I mean, you know, open to restricted or prohibited.
I mean, to me, it should be, right, a fuel card is provided for this purpose, but what happens if the fuel card, you know, you get a new car, right, or you've got a rental, right, what are you supposed to do, right? I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Excuse me, Chair Philip, wouldn't you have your credit card and give a receipt and job done?
But it's actually, this is the bit I don't understand, right? If you've got a council credit card, you can't use it for fuel purchases. That's the way I read it, right?
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I get that, but I'm just talking about the logic, sorry.
Yeah. I'm just, maybe it needs some, all I'm saying is that this might need some tweaking. The other one too is, the issue is you have removed on page 105, right? And very few, your use of air points, right? That's a change, right? Because, thank you for the track changes because it's clearly not, right? And I can just show you that I got, and this to me is, it's really hard to police, right? Is if I've got a credit card, a personal credit card that I also get air points on, and I travel for council, right? I also get air point dollars, right? But just for your information, I'm being open and transparent. I flew back from a local government conference, some people to see me there from 7 till 9, 2-hour flight, and I got $5.50. So that was my recognition from Air New Zealand if I was a council employee, for spending 2 hours of my time travelling home from council would have been $5.50. Right now, I have seen councils actually say that because of the low value, it's generally accepted, right? But it's got to be specific in the policy. Now, the protection is people say, oh, you go and book the most expensive flight, but the protection is the person can't actually book their own flights. Right? So I actually just wonder whether, the rationale for it actually being changed from, being permitted to being not permitted to, because to me it's very, very difficult to identify how do I keep that $5.50 separate from the other air points that I've gained on part of my credit card, which generally is actually a lot more. Just, Brian, do you want to comment on that from the?
Sorry, so the rationale here is to to align with the Office of Auditor General guidelines, and the Office of the Auditor General is very specific about air points, and it says that organisations must take every reasonable step to stop them accruing to staff. So we do have absolutely some protections. So all of our air travel bookings are all centralised, and they're all done under the all of government contract. My understanding from our procurement team is that we can turn off the accrual of air points for that, so that's helpful.
Oh, for that individual, for that trip?
For all trips. So I haven't explored that yet, but that's my understanding at the moment. And I also, checking with the person that does our air travel bookings, that they don't believe that we're having air points accrue at the moment. So it's really probably just formalising what's already happening for us, and to bring our policy into alignment with Office of Auditor General, which is around keeping that audit comment.
I did have discussions with the then Assistant Auditor General Local Government on this issue, and he says, yes, it's only a recommendation, and if the council can actually justify why it believes it's appropriate, it can. I don't want to sort of, right? But if you can mitigate it by turning it off, but the way I understand that actually works, if someone then actually goes up to the, if you can actually then put your air points in at a later date and still accrue them. So it's, it's not a foolproof system, right? And I just wonder whether for that amount of travel, whether it's actually worth the grief, right? If you can turn it off and it stays off, that's well and good. But, you could actually create a whole lot of work for people. Right, I'll leave that up to the Chief Executive to talk about. That was all. I just got some other conflicts in the policy that you're saying is that the staff can't use discounts as from suppliers, but then it goes on to say we can use it for where the whole of government discounts are allowed. Can you just clarify why one says one and one says the other?
So that was Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember what you're referring to, because this was a conversation at the executive leadership team around this. So the guidelines are that staff cannot or should not participate in discounts because of council contracts. The risk there is around conflict of interest and bias towards suppliers. The discussion around all of government contracts, and I think this mainly related to, say, Noel Leeming, I think, making a Christmas special available, is that, the staff don't have an opportunity to influence that contract anyway, and it is like these are sort of one-off specials rather than a regular thing where you could go to a local place and get regular discounts from somewhere. That was the thinking why the two different areas.
Right, and my final question is, we don't have a CFO, but I'll ask the finance team. The finance team are actually charged with monitoring this. Is that right? That's quite an onerous, right, monitoring regime, right? Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Maybe if I could comment first as well. So we have talked this through in quite a lot of detail. We haven't made a commitment as to the level of reporting yet. What we were thinking of doing is looking at, we have already looked at how some other councils report sensitive expenditure, and there's a very wide range of reporting from individual transaction level for all of executive team, mayor and councillors, right through to sort of just a grouped for elected members only, and there's all others in between. And it's going to be very dependent on our systems and processes' ability to capture that information.
Thank you, through you, Chair Philip. I think our systems will allow us to do this reporting, but we need to make that definition around what that reporting looks like for us to then make adjustments in the back end. In my mind, it should be quite simple, in which case we can just create a new coding structure for sensitive expenditure and apply that across the wider organisation. 99.9% of our sensitive expenditure is incurred by way of a credit card for those that have a credit card, so that is pretty straightforward and easy pull as well. But I think the hard part is us determining what that level of transparency and reporting looks like, and then setting the system up to enable it to be not as labour intensive as it might be initially.
In other words, work in progress. Thank you, Sarah. And my last question, and this is for council. Currently, the chief executive can approve overseas travel. Right? I wonder whether, as part of, because I don't know if you've read in the paper that one of the papers did in Lagoima and published all the overseas travel that various councils had spent, whether it would be appropriate for not council to approve overseas travel, but to be informed of overseas travel before it actually occurs as part of the sensitive expenditure. Because overseas travel, I can assure you, is not a perk, right? Right? Particularly when you're going for work, but actually because it's the media's attention, whether it's appropriate that council is actually informed prior to. Now, I go way back when I was a staff member. I did do a couple of overseas trips. One of those was actually sponsored by, well, actually I had three overseas trips. Two of those were actually sponsored by other organisations. They paid for my airfares. So I think that is also appropriate, because otherwise, Philip Jones is away overseas yet again. The ratepayer is actually forking out for Philip to go overseas. Well, no, someone else actually paid for it. And if that information was made public, then that actually reduces that perception that staff are on a junket when they go overseas. Any comments, particularly from elected members? Getting a nod from Mayor Tracy. All right. You happy with that, Mr. Chief Executive? Yes? All right. We can just. Thank you. We've got no other
Waiting
comments.
for the occasion.
Sorry?
We're waiting for an occasion.
Oh. I think I had to wait a very long time before I had mine, and that happened in a very short period of time, and then it was all over. Right, any further discussion? So we go back to the recommendation. So we're going to just go, as per, we're just going to receive it. Do we need to, with any minor amendments? How do we want to deal with this, Mr. Chief Executive?
This amendment.
Sorry, through the chair, what I suggested, it is adopted but delegated to make a minor amendment, such as once that policy is in place.
I'm just checking to make sure we got the committee's got delegated authority, or has it got to go to full council for adoption?
Good point.
Maybe we might adjourn for 5 minutes, since we'll be going an hour and a half, and we'll just check the delegations. So adjourn for 5 minutes and be back here at 11:05 sharp. Thank you. Thank you. Next item is 7.6, our strategic register. Oh, sorry, I need to put the resolution. My apologies. Now, clarification. According to staff, we do actually have delegated authority because it fits part of the internal control mechanisms. So that's the delegation. What we're noting in terms of the minor changes, just for reference, we're going to, Stephen, if you could just clarify what's being changed, thank you.
Well, thank you. So the changes are that for international travel for staff, there will be, council will be informed, and there'll be no change that for chief executive, mayor and council's international travel, that must be approved by council. For the use of credit cards, we're going to change the prohibited use for purchase of fuel and oil to restricted, so for exceptional circumstances. We're not going to change the airports. We're going to leave that as that airports are not to accrue. I think that was the last one. Yeah, that was the. Yes, sorry. And asset disposal, we're going to leave in that policy is coming. So currently we follow the processes we follow. We don't have the policy in place right now, but that'll catch up to this later in the year.
Can I understand your question, Councillor, and the problem is if we actually put in proposed, all right, then once it's actually adopted, then we've got to go back and remove it from the policy again, right? So are we comfortable with, asking the council, are we comfortable? Yep.
And Mr. Chair, sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult with it, but if we adopt a policy that has a requirement that we follow a policy that doesn't exist, it concerns me as to what we are requiring staff to do. That's my concern with it. I'm not trying to be difficult with it. It's just this is a policy that we say people must follow, and we're asking them to follow something that doesn't exist.
Through the chair, you could have it as an additional resolution that once that policy is in place, it's delegated to Chief Executive to add that line word for word. You could actually outline the word, so once it's in place, it will automatically go. We can update the policy without coming back to council.
Right, thank you for that, Brian. So the recommendation is we're going to, it's rather than as circulated, take the word out and put with minor amendments, right? That's the first thing, and then to add that the policy be amended to reflect the asset disposal policy once adopted. And I think the fact that we're receiving and adopting, I don't think we need 1.2. Staff and councillors happy with that? Clarification, thank you.
So could I just ask, will we see that policy? It will come back to here or to our meeting?
I don't believe it will actually come back for formal adoption, but I think it will, once it's track changes are made, it will be available for all elected members. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, the asset policy, or this? The asset disposal. Absolutely, the asset disposal will come back to this committee. Yes. Thank you. Sorry. All right. So, with that change in the resolution, do I have a mover? Mayor Tracy, do I have a seconder? Councillor Scott. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Next item, 7.6, the strategic register review and setting of internal program. Thank you, Stephen, again. Some more bedtime reading. Take your report as read. Any key highlights, further information to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. So this report has slightly expanded at very late notice when the agenda was due, but there's sort of 4 key areas, and I wonder if we deal with them in this order, if that suits. So we have the environmental scan from Malcolm Thomas attached to the report. We have the risk register review. We have the setting of the internal audit program, and the other thing that we've added in there at late notice is the planned stop announcement by government because of its impact on our strategic risks. So, order of play I have is environmental scan, risks, internal audit, and planned stop. I'm happy to be in whichever order. That's all good.
We've got a nod around the table. Thank you.
So the purpose of the report is to complete a full strategic risk register review. We last did that when Malcolm had some workshops with council during the long-term plan process. So it's our first opportunity to look at the full register again, and then based on the register to look at our internal audit program for the next triennium. And Malcolm may have some comments on the environmental scan. Yeah, so the environmental scan is page, it's 157 in I.
Thanks, Steve. Chair Phillip, Council. Look, yeah, I know the time constraints you got. So there's a few key points, I think, and a lot of detail that will just leave us read. Clearly, there's a high level of change and possible change taking place. We seem to always say that, but I think this time probably the most we've seen in a long time. And we're coming from 2024 was a pretty tough year for Tararua economically, and unemployment has gone up. Households have been under stress, but things are improving. The rural sector has had a great 24-25 season, one out of the books. High prices and no huge climate impacts, with all sorts of things going on all around the region and sort of avoiding this area, thankfully. So that's had record beef returns, reasonable sheep meat returns, very high dairy returns nominally, record. But balance sheets are being restored basically across the rural sector, and that spending, that income flow has yet to flow through to retail services and so forth, because I think most farmers are taking a cautious approach. They're restoring their balance sheets and building back the confidence. Hopefully, if the prices stay anywhere near what they are now, and don't get any floods and droughts and all that sort of stuff, in 25, 26, then you will start to see the benefits of that increased income coming through to the rest of the local economy. That's what normally happens. It takes a wee while. Farmers tend to be pretty conservative. But population and housing growth has been pretty low. There's certainly less in the urban area than had been forecast. Rents were still cranking up until reasonably recently, but there's been some signs in the last few months that rental levels are pulling back. While the figures still show, because it's on an annual basis, are still tracking up, in the last few months they've actually pegged back. There's been some talk of rents falling there's been a few more houses available. Look, there's massive significant change proposed in legislation, and there's extensive briefing of that in the scan. We've got big reforms going on in the RMA space, and Amy's here to brief you on one of those things coming up. But even without that, there's this extensive list of RMA regulation and policy related changes that are going through. Submissions close on Sunday,
I think, 27th of July, for a whole lot of those. And what we're looking at, there's some major changes in the freshwater national policy statement. These things, most of these changes involve pulling back regulations to a certain extent. They're largely positive for Council 3 waters and farmers. They will come with some lower environmental outcomes probably if they go through. But you've also got a few things in here that could have a major impact in the urban areas. You've got the ability to do granny flats up to 70 square metres, in which case it's not granny flats, that's 2-bedroom units. As of right, as an ancillary structure, that could have quite major impacts. Certainly the whole building sector is already gearing up for it. And also for Papakainga, on Maori land. A lot of freeing up of regulations on that. Right, Local Government Act changes. 4 well-beings are going again. Some of us have been through all this before. And look, for Taurua District Council, our experience of the last time this happened, it won't make any difference to anything. You'll have to change some words in the long-term plan. There's some strategic words we'll have to change, but in effect, didn't make any difference last time. I don't think it'll make much difference this time. But they are, there is another couple of things in there in the LGA amendments. One of them is the Section 17A is gone, completely gone. So there will be no ongoing requirement to review your activities every 6 years. It's gone. It'll be up to whatever. It'll become more of an audit. It'll actually be driven more from what this committee decides to do and your long-term plan process in terms of how you want to review your activities and the way that you do it. But that legislative requirement is being deleted. There's also chief executive contracts will now be 5+5 instead of 5+2. There's also the threat of rate caps is in the language in the bill and in press releases. So they're basically saying final warning under this framework. If things don't improve, then we're going to look at New South Wales type rates caps. Right. There's some other quite major things going along. The earthquake-prone buildings legislation is under full review, and the dates have been pushed out for mandatory, meeting of those. The emissions trading scheme, there's significantly more protection for land use classes 6, and a prohibition on whole farm conversions on land use classes 1 to 5. That cuts in December this year. There's a whole lot of detail around all these things. And so, with 3 waters, the RMA stuff, less regulation, particularly for infrastructure, there's quite a bit going on. And then on top of that, we have all the international trade risk, which will affect farmers. And my summary of all that is, who knows? Certainly the people putting the rules in place don't seem to. So good luck anyone else trying to work it out. But, at the moment, it hasn't affected New Zealand's trading at all, really, because the markets have been so strong. It's just the way it... so who knows? So, but overall, I think more positive times coming. The new highway is a game changer for at least parts of the district. Certainly, people are still exploring that route, and it certainly made a big difference to me coming over. So that's well worth 830 million. I think the health of the rural sector will flow through to the wider economy over the next year. More positive outlook. Should note that rural households are doing a lot better than urban households, where it's still pretty tough. Yeah, look, I'll leave the rest for that. Philip?
That announcement at local government conference was a bit of a shock about that stop district plan changes. So if you're amending your financial contributions by a plan change, you can't. right? There's a whole lot of ramifications, right? Which I don't think the government's really actually thought through, except they will be allowing private plan changes. Right?
So exceptions.
Pardon? But they haven't announced the detail of all the exceptions yet.
Hold on. But yeah, I think Amy's going to clarify.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, sorry,
Yep.
move off the environmental scan?
Well, that's part of the environmental scan, but yeah, absolutely. Oh, yep, absolutely, yes.
On page 9 of your document, Malcolm, you reflect on the number of houses being built. It's very low. But you made a statement, the government significantly reduced Kaingaroa activity and there is very limited support for social housing. What is going to be our iwi response to that?
You have your local iwi, Kahanunu and Rangatane, Tamaki Nurua, they have a number of sites across the district, including some urban ones. There's still the intention to develop those sites, but what was available in terms of government support to enable that to happen currently does not exist. And so these things are still being looked at with a different hat. For Rangatane, that's me as well, as amongst other people. But there is a new. It's all being consolidated under MHUD into a new fund called the Flexible Fund, which was announced in the budget, 300 million a year. And as of yet, there is no criteria announced as to when you can apply and what you have to do. So, as usual, it was an announcement with no detail. And so we've got no idea as to whether we're eligible or not. I can tell you that some of those sites are relatively at the top of the list in terms of the regional government agencies, in terms of if there is funding available, then they're well looked at, they're well regarded, but at the moment there's nothing. And then with the cost of housing, while the cost increases have come down towards, pretty stable, the cost of building in Dannevirke is, if anything, it's certainly not cheaper than building in Napier or the construction cost. Land cost, of course, is different. So to actually, for a developer to build the housing and make a return on it, given the lower house price values here, it's extremely difficult. It's actually worse than that. It's not possible. So there's still aspirations and there's still planning to do it. It's a funding issue. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you for that.
Yeah, Chair Philip, I have a question.
Oh, sorry, Peter. Yep.
With regard to the plan stopping, that's very disappointing. Well, it's very disappointing on the one hand, but exciting on the other, in that we'll await the detail of that, which I believe is coming up in the 30th of July meeting, or hopefully. But here we are in a position to take advantage of the opening of the new road. And the intention with the plan stop is to encourage development of housing opportunities in part, and we're being stymied in doing that with this plan stop that they're putting on. And I just wonder to what extent we're able to talk to the minister, put our position, find out what are the key things that will prevent us from putting our plan in place. You talk about financial contributions or development contributions. Well, that can possibly wait. But I don't believe we need to be waiting too much longer to seek some definite answers as to whether we can or can't continue as planned.
I think we'll leave that to Amy to answer, but I should just say that in terms of development contributions, the Three Waters legislation under the new model, the Three Waters entity will be setting a water contribution, which is effectively the Three Waters development contributions, under that waters legislation. And so the new entity, when it comes into force, will be looking at that, and my expectation is that they would be putting that in place across the whole entity. And so you may get development contributions effectively for Three Waters here in the next few years. But it's not a plan change because it's through the waters.
Yeah, but also there is also development contributions on their way out as well.
Correct, because there's a whole new...
But that's only for urban areas, if you actually peel back the onion.
That's because of the Three Waters.
Yeah, but there's so rural roading, if you had development contributions for rural roading, it's gone. That's something DIA are aware of. Right, Amy, thank you.
Just on the agenda, this is page 129.
It was a nice, through you, Chair Philip, it was a nice segue from our councillor there around the plan stock policy. That was an announcement which came out on Wednesday at the Local Government New Zealand Conference through Chris Bishop's speech. The plan stock policy will be progressed as part of an amendment to the Resource Management Consenting and Other Systems Changes Amendment Bill. So it's an amendment to an amendment, and we won't get an opportunity to make a submission on it. A second reading to that bill occurred in Parliament on the same day as the speech, or Government's announcement, and Government intends that the bill will be enacted by the end of August, which is difficult for us because we were looking to adopt our draft at the next council meeting on August the 27th. Once enacted, councils will be required to stop progressing plan changes and plan reviews that are not yet at a hearing stage. So it's pretty black and white. There will be a 90-day period for councils to withdraw their plan changes and plan reviews or apply for exemptions to continue where relevant. There are some automatic exemptions, but unfortunately a 10-year review doesn't seem to fit under those automatic exemptions. There is a pathway for discretionary exemptions to be applied for to the Minister for the Environment, but the detail around what those exemptions are have not yet been provided. But I guess we have sought some legal advice from Cooper Rapley that was actually undertaking the legal review of our district plan, and they have advised us that overall on our review this plan change does not appear to fall within any of the announced automatic exemptions. It is possible that a further exemption ground will be specified allowing councils to proceed. However, we do not consider this likely based on the information provided to date. As the Government wishes to make this change by way of an amendment paper to the Resource Management Consenting and Other System Changes Bill, which is already at the Committee of the Whole House stage, we expect that further announcements will soon be made. But we recommend that you pause all work on this plan change, at least until it is known about the scope of the plan stop. Further evaluation and a final decision may become appropriate once further information is provided. So it stopped us in our tracks, literally.
Peter, your mic's on, I think.
Is it? Well, if I can, seeing it's on, save me turning it off for a moment, if I can comment. Yes, very disappointing, but I would like some clarification in our case. I hear what you've said, but in our case, we're ready to go, ready to make available more opportunity for housing development, which is part of the reason I understand that this plan stop has been put in place, so they can free things up. I guess we wait for the detail to come out in the next week or two, but extremely disappointing at this stage.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the update, Amy, and thanks for the incredible amount of work yourself and the team and Dan have done on this review that ironically is currently a legal requirement. So we've gone in and we've spent a huge amount of money on that, and I would like it, and I'm not asking for this now, but I would like at some point a report of how much we have spent following the government's legal requirement and how much this change potentially will cost us. Now, we don't know the exact answer to that yet because we don't know the detail and we don't know how much we're going to be able to transplant into a new regime. I hope that it's a fair amount, but one thing I noticed in the government statements is there appeared to be no talk at all of any funding contributions to help councils move into the new regime, which is quite ironic for a government that tells council that it needs to keep rates down, but potentially is going to cost ratepayers a huge amount of money. With that said, this could be exciting, potentially, because there could be some very welcome and positive changes with it. The other bit that I really want us to be keeping a close eye on is last week I heard an interview on News Talk ZB with the chair of the expert RMA advisory panel who's helping lead this work, Jeanette Campbell, who specifically talked about the amount of work that she expects councils will have to undertake over the next wee while once the legislation comes in to make sure that we comply with the RMA changes. This could be a really huge expense for council that I think we need to keep a really, really close eye on. And I'm with Peter to a degree. I think we have to be presenting some of this information in our case directly to government so that, one, they can see that we may be limiting some growth opportunity in the short term if we're not able to open up that space as quickly as we were hoping. That may not come true, by the way, because these changes might expedite things, but we will see. But I think government needs to understand the impact on smaller councils like ours. But yeah, it'd be really handy at some point to, once we've got more information, to get a more fulsome report, particularly at some of the financial implications. But thanks again for all your work on it, team.
Thank you. Any other questions? Through you, Chair Phillip, can I respond in part to Councillor Gilmore's question? We actually did do some rough numbers. I worked with Sarah yesterday, which is very kind of you. And we looked at it since 2021 until the 30th of June, and it does include some better off funding as well, but the spend is around $900,923 that has been spent towards work that is building towards the district plan review. It does include things like liquefaction, assessment and modelling. It does include our growth strategy work. It does include infrastructure responses to the growth strategy, designation work, some flood modelling that we've done, but you can see that that requirement to undertake a full district plan review has, it's a big spend for council. But in saying that, on the other hand, we don't want to throw more money at it at the expense that it's going to change, and then from a ratepayer perspective, it doesn't look wise to keep throwing money at maybe the wrong thing, given that the amendments are coming.
All right. Okay. Does that include staff time?
Sorry, no, that does not include staff time. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Right, back to Stephen. Thank you for that. My last question on this. So even once we get if we do fall within the exemption, we can do it. then we're out of time in terms of making a decision for council because of the elections. So basically nothing can happen till the new year. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. So back to the report, and the next section of the report that I wanted to look at was the review of the Strategic Risk Register. So take that section as read. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. That at 4.5, the review of the Strategic Risk Register allows the committee to make inquiry and gain confidence about how council is identifying and managing significant risks. The executive team all own the risks in the register, and we've conducted a review with them before coming here today. And the status of the risks hasn't changed significantly since the LTP, except these four, which we've seen a reduction in the level of risk. One is our ability to deliver capital projects. The risk there has fallen as we've got our processes and systems more robust. Do you want me to give you the page number? You're okay, I'll just summarise that. Yep. NZTA funding, the risk level was at severe during the LTP because we're very uncertain, so that certainty is now more in place. Population growth and the ageing population, the risk around there has reduced as we've seen those numbers start to come through. So those are the only four areas where there's been any major change. And so what I've done is just from page 130, I've just listed them all out in order of severity, and the commentary sections mainly relate to summaries from the environmental scan. So if there's any questions about any of them, I'm happy to take those.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. I really appreciate the depth of context that you've gone into with this, Steve. Can I just back up to it's on page 125. Because I'm really keen that we provide oversight on an internal audit program, and to me something like this, it's kind of like having a satellite in the sky that you're not going to capture all of the sky. We have to make a bit of a judgment as to what we focus on. So in 8.3, you've noted there, you've suggested the following focus areas, and I'm going to pop a question that might stir things up a bit, but how could we, with that particular list and the assessment that you've done, how could we have strategically found out or discovered holes in our system when it came to the Pukaha incident and our direct debit rates issue? Which focus areas might an internal audit have exposed those ones? It's a tough question. And I appreciate it's like taking chunks out of an elephant. You've got to start somewhere. But when I reflect on some of the blindsided stuff we've had, which potentially could have been picked up within an internal audit program, these bullet points, would they have found those, or would they have just missed the... And that's a risk that we as an organisation have to accept, because we can't have a satellite that gets the whole sky. It's very challenging, I appreciate that, but I like to look at these sort of tools to find ways where we are closing the gaps. We are ensuring that our system and our programs in place allow those things to be flagged and we're able to deal with them. I guess I'm not expecting an answer, Chair Phillip, but I mean, give it a go, please.
I'm ready. Thank you. So this report, and you're talking about the internal audit part of it, this is the first time when we've really sat down and looked strategically at our highest risk areas And so that's where we have to make sure that we've got our risk register right. So we've looked at our highest risk areas, and those risk areas where our internal controls have the highest, are the most important in keeping those risks under controls. So that's what I've attempted to do in deciding on the list. Within those are pretty broad areas, so we'd have to look at, you know, what particular parts we wanted to focus on. So that's kind of the thinking, that if we've got a reasonable list of risks, and we look at, you know, where our highest risks are and what are the risks with the highest level of controls. One thing I will say is that the risk register doesn't specifically cover, at the moment, expenditure control and revenue control. They're not listed in there as risks, and that those are gaps that need to be filled, and that might inform us better. Yeah, that would be my.
And through the chair, and just to add to that, so I think internal auditing's becoming more and more important, and at this stage we don't have a designated resource to do internal auditing. We do have Steve that covers off bits of it, but his role's a lot wider than the internal auditing, and it's certainly been discussed at the ELT level about doing more of these internal audits to discover, you know, some of these things. We do on a day-to-day basis do discover things, processes and systems that need tidy up, because it's better to discover them before, you know, the balloon goes up. But it's certainly something that council should be, through this committee, working on how we can resource that better to have it as a more sort of permanent role going forward, because it is coming more and more important. And as there's more and more change, there's going to be more and more opportunities for things to, you know, slip through the gaps.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Philip. Yeah, because when all these things happened, the reason we were the answer was they don't do, obviously, a line-by-line audit. It would take forever. But then the ratepayer doesn't see it that way. The ratepayer sees exactly what Councillor Ward's just said, and you can't blame them. They have the audit office, and then they see how much they pay the audit office. It's trying to make this, you know, look right.
Through the chair, I think that, and that's sort of emphasising my point, that, you know, to have a real good, robust internal audit program, we do need to invest in that, because at the moment we don't. So if I was to be perfectly honest, there's not enough internal auditing going on, and we need to really address that going forward, because local government's becoming more and more complex. There's more and more expectations. There's so much change going on through a wide range of government and other aspects, that to keep on top of all this would fill up an internal auditor's program pretty quickly, to be honest, if we had one specifically for that.
But there are changes afoot.
Well, it's something that we certainly see as we need to get on top of, and obviously ELT have been discussing this and looking at how we can provide some resources in this space, and whether or not, as we have vacancies pop up, we need to compare an internal auditor versus maybe a role that's currently vacant, and make a decision on which one's going to be more beneficial for the organisation. But I personally see this, and Steve's done a great job in terms of the internal auditing that he's done, but his role's already quite wide in terms of his responsibilities, so we will need to look at how we can manage that going forward, and be certainly something when I leave that ELT with the interim and the next CE should definitely work towards having something permanent, someone permanent.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? When I read this, right, I've got some concerns, right, and some questions. On page 128, right, jumping down, right, we haven't reviewed our fraud since 2018, right? And our IT on page 130 for 4 years, right? Those to me, right, are actually high risks, right? And should be looked at. Now, look, I hear Councillor Sharon's question, right? But it's not actually in our risk register, and I would actually have noted, thank you for that question, is to me is one of the things we should be looking at is, turn, the good stuff into the bad stuff. So the issue for me is it's poor internal controls. So how do we avoid poor internal control, and how do we get assurance that there's good internal controls might be a better way of doing it, and also how do we ensure that there's actually good reporting, right? Now that's, as the Chief Executive has talked about, is basically the role of internal audit, right? So the question I have is, with the limited resources that Council has got, how do we actually achieve those things, particularly with, you've got fraud, IT, the issues that have been raised today and previously, how do we actually develop a better heads-up system? No.
Yeah, look, I think we are developing maturity and making space in my role, particularly now that Gillian is here doing health and safety and covering that so well, to do some of this work. We do have some limited budget as well, which probably gets us to about one externally provided audit every 1.5 every 2 years, sort of thing, or 1 to 1.5 every 2 years. That can help. We also have other audits that are already programmed in. So, for example, as Dan says, we have the Tararua Alliance annual performance and financial audit. We have the NZTA audits of the Tararua Alliance as well. We have our Safe Plus health and safety audit during the end of this year. We are audited for our building consents authority every time that gets renewed as well externally. So we have things that are happening anyway, and we really need to take advantage of those and keep reporting those through to here, and that takes care of those parts. The other thing is, for example, with IT, they do have a self-assessment system that they use, similar to the one the Tararua Alliance showed you. So there's some internal work that's done that might be helpful to come through to the committee as well. So there are things happening. I guess the part we're trying to bring is some discipline to the internal audits that we can achieve over and above all of those things that are happening at the moment. That's what I was looking for in this report. And exactly as Chair Philip was saying, if you look at page 124, 7.3, it's that 3 lines model where it's all for risk management. The frontline roles are your first line of defence in managing risk. That's the people who are actually out there delivering. Then you've got our second line roles, and then the third line is the internal audit role. And at the moment, that's kind of split up around the place, and that's what would normally report through to the Audit and Risk Committee. And then the last line of defence, sort of the fourth line, is the Audit New Zealand audit. So we should have all of those other things in place and working, and they are the final check that we're doing those things. Yeah.
Can I just add? Through Chair, can I just also add, there are other sort of internal controls that we do have. For instance, yearly I've got to review to see if our fraud policies and everything is still sort of fit for purpose. So I do run over those, and I was looking over Sarah because Beth puts this in front of me quite often to go through. We also have our pro mapping system controls that we do also. I have to clear them, I actually have to run through them and check on those as well, as do a lot of the senior managers and other managers. So we do have those sort of controls that come through to at least us to, I mean, it's not an in-depth review, but you are having a look over that to make sure nothing seems untoward, and you are reviewing any sort of, you've got to report on any instances of fraud, and if there were, what have we done about it, what other improvements have we made, and those happen on a yearly basis, although it doesn't directly impact the fraud policy itself. I forget the name of those ones.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Right, so if we go right back to page 121. So what we're, now we've got some XXs in there. What do we, huh? I'll put my green pen, auditor's pen through that and go, what do we mean by here, right? Do you want to elaborate? Thanks, Stephen.
Glad you spotted that. So I've provided the options, and really what I'm listening to is if there's anything, like I didn't want to finalise a list of audits that the committee has on its program until I've heard from you about what the priorities for you are as well. So I've listed the priorities that I see in 8.3, thinking that we could probably deliver around 2 a year, so that's 6 over and above the ones that are already programmed. And it's whether there's anything different in there that you see as a priority for the program.
Any suggestions from the committee? I'm going to be bold, right? I think the 2 that you've highlighted as being overdue, right? Being the first cab off the rank isn't the fraud. Well, it should be number 2, it's IT, right? IT certainly does keep me awake at night, right? The level of sophistication that is coming, when we've got artificial intelligence now in the wings. My concern is it's not when another council gets hacked. So it's not if, it's when, right? And that to me is almost, we need a formal review on our IT systems, particularly with the changing environment that we've actually got with AI. And the next one I would be, now this is my bean counter happening, right? I would be looking at saying is, do we actually have good internal control processes at the high level to mitigate the risk of fraud? Because that hasn't been done since 2018. That would be my, just based on the information. Yes, we've got other risks around the 3 water reforms, which should actually be top of the list, but I think that's we can't take draw a line in the sand yet, because we're still drawing, we're building the aeroplane almost ready to fly. And I think once the plane's a bit closer to ready to flying, Peter, we might actually have a look at that. And our statutory compliance, I think, has been sort of under the pump already, particularly with Te Mara Arawai and some of the work that's already been done. So that's my priorities that I would suggest. Happy to be persuaded otherwise.
I just go back to my satellite reference. We can't capture them all, but and I don't know if it's appropriate now, Chair Phillip, because you seem to be keen to adopt the recommendation. But if I could just make a quick comment on the presentation of the different risks in those tables, Steve, and I went through them in detail, and I think it's a really good way of reflecting a summary of where we're at. The commentary and the environmental scan is all tied in there. So, but I know it's on your list, but I just wonder, given some of what's been happening recently, is there, if I look particularly at page 144, it's the item around iwi and Māori partnerships. And there's some comments in there that I've flagged and thought, ooh. If we just have a quick look at that table, and I'm not sure that it would change the status of do we include it or not include it, but you've made some comments there about where we're at with that space. The regular governance meetings, they're not happening. There's a comment there with the Better Off funding coming to an end, that rate funding will be required to maintain. There's things happening in our relationship with iwi that whether or not this gets heightened up the list, I mean, I get fraud in IT, don't get me wrong, but the potential we have with the summaries that you've prepared, Steve, is we've got a working brief now on what is changing. And, 6 months ago, we might not have thought there's no risk there. We just carry on the way we're going. But when you write those little comments, and I'm thinking, ooh, does that change? And so I guess the question is, Chair Phillip, as we move through time, as I said, 6 months ago, I wouldn't have even thought about this as going further up the priority list. So how do we incorporate a change in an environment or an action that's happened for you to be able to go, whoops, guys, we've got to put this further up the list? This was a really valuable presentation for me. And so before we finally close the loop, Chair Phillip, I just wondered, can I seek some guidance on how this could be such a useful tool for changing our priorities and what we're looking at, if that's appropriate?
Absolutely. I didn't hear any comments or questions.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's the value of so as we review our strategic risk going forward, then we can look at our internal audit program and make sure that it's still going to be looking at the things that are important. So we have quite a number of internal controls around our iwi partnership. So those are things that internal audit can, we can pick it up because they're around us. We've got a partnership agreement, and we can look and see whether we're doing the things in the partnership agreement that we say we will. So it could come onto the program if it's a priority. But in terms of as changes happen, that's where we need to be. You're right, as the committee needs to be thinking, and I need to be recommending that we alter our program.
So that's where it can come in then.
Sorry, Sandy just pointed out, we've actually got in the audit. So this is where we've got this nice little crossover, right, between the work we're doing, the risk appetite, and also the next training's work program. We've actually, really good question, right? That we've actually got it there already in the work program. What's it understand? So I can't read.
Under assurance.
Oh, we've got assurance already. So maybe what I'm hearing is you like this, right? I think it's really good that how do we actually bring this report back? Maybe not every meeting, right? Otherwise we'll kill Stephen. But the issue is, how do we bring this type of report back going forward as things change, right? Because that's the important bit as we've got further information. Right. Any other thoughts? So where does that priority then sit with mine, right? No, absolutely. No. Yeah.
And I don't like to use that language, but I too was concerned about the lack of internal audits being conducted on what I would have thought were key areas for a long period of time. And because it is like going to be eating an elephant, I think for different reasons, those need to be right up there. I have been assured that there is a mechanism that as things move along over the next 3 months, if something else comes out of the woodwork, we have a mechanism within which we can change the focus, I guess. You've got a big long list of focus areas, Steve. I get you could probably tackle 2 or 3 a year. If we've ignored some of those bullet points in those focus areas because they're not on the list, I think we're doing a disservice to our community. and the use of this very valuable tool. End of lecture.
I didn't take it as a lecture. But what I'm hearing, right, is maybe we take this information and put it into that work program. Right? Is that appropriate? Right. So, right. Good feedback. Are there any other questions or comments? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Can I just get a bit of an update as to whether we do have an up-to-date significance and engagement policy as well as a cultural competency policy strategy in place that is current?
So yes, we certainly have a significant and engagement policy in terms of the cultural competency framework. So that is still being worked on by staff, but Sandy might be able to provide a bit more insight into that.
Sorry, are you referencing a particular policy, or are you talking about the cultural competency framework?
The key existing controls that you have identified in the iwi Māori partnerships you put down as cultural competency policy strategy as well as a significance and engagement policy. I just want to know that they are up to date and that they are actively being used.
Yes, so the significance and engagement policy, yes, the cultural competency framework is still under development with staff.
And
that hasn't prevented us from progressing, though, I'd just like to say. So we are working through how like a process and a bit of a training plan, particularly for induction of new staff, which has also involved us engaging with iwi.
Can I follow up on that? Can I ask who is actually supporting you with doing the cultural competency policy and strategy? Have you actually got any external support to help you with our policy in that space?
No.
Do you think you need some external support in that space?
Through Chair, you were certainly looking at the options of that, and what I've had conversations with both iwi regarding how they see this going forward. So I know both iwi want to work with us in terms of developing that, because they want to each tell their own stories rather than bring someone else in. So those conversations have certainly started with our local iwi, but in terms of an external resource, we just need to scope what they would do at this stage. We've managed to create some frameworks. The expertises will have to come from someone else, no doubt, but the actual framework is, I don't want to say straightforward, but it's reasonably, we could build that in-house with the support of our iwi partners. But in terms of delivery, the training programs and all that, that will come at a later date to feed into that training program.
Absolutely.
With our Better Off Funding Building iwi Capacity project, do you see that this could be something that we could actually use some of that funding to do, to help get our, to help with them to put our competency policy and strategies and stuff together?
Through Chair, no. So the agreement's currently with iwi regarding that is around the TIO type work they are doing. So all of their resource consenting and water, that's been all allocated towards that. That is coming to an end, and I've asked Peter Wimsett to pick that up later on early next year to bring to council in terms of those annual plan discussions. But in saying that, there is budget for that type of work to happen currently. So there is an iwi budget to look at our cultural competency framework already in there.
Any further questions? Right, so if we go back, right back. Oops. To page, where are we? So I've lost my computer's just playing up on me. There we go. 121, how do we resolve 1.3? Stephen?
Well, I just wondered that we've definitely got the first, say, 3, whether we set that now and look to just to lock in that first that first tranche.
First tranche. So the first tranche being confirmation of, so what are we, is everyone comfortable? So that's option, oh, sorry, thanks. Yep, cybersecurity. Option 5, fraud, right? And then what was? Option, no, I think we're doing that anyway, right? But I think just carrying on from, is there anything else that the committee wants? Bearing in mind that this will probably come to the first meeting in November for the new committee to actually endorse. So what I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, is you would actually develop a bit of a plan of what this would actually look like, bring it to the first committee, whenever that may be, of this, if the council decides to have a committee such as this, to then actually endorse what is actually being proposed. Is that the way you see it happening?
It is. This will give the focus area, and then we'll need to come up with a plan about how we deliver on that.
And the plan will be confirmed by the committee. All right, so it's not, all we're doing is we're saying this is our priority at the moment. The staff will go away and develop that plan and come back with the final proposal. And then I would imagine, as part of that, the next report you'll be saying is, this is basically our 3-year work program based on your current risks, and the committee can then amend it as they see fit on a constant basis. Okay. Did the question then, does the committee want to look at iwi relations, or are you comfortable with where we're at?
Are you asking what I see as our, top priorities for focus areas? I'm in full agreement with Sharon that I think iwi partnership needs to be at the top front, because we do need to have something in place in case things do change with our losing of the funding, with better off funding, and the possibility with the referendum, which I do hope we will be voting yes for. But I do see that fraud and IT is also important, but I would like to see iwi Māori partnership be part of that as well, as a focus for us to keep an eye on.
Basically, what it maybe the way around it is to actually say, if this is our 3 areas of focus, right, and that as part of the first meeting of the committee, that they staff come back and say, this is the way we propose to undertake that. Some of them there might be some internal resources available, sometimes there might be additional resources required. And I think that might be the way of addressing that. Very comfortable with that. Okay, absolutely, Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So just a question, because I don't disagree with the comments from Councillor Nye. However, I think some of the other ones, the IT, the full reviews, feel a little bit different. I think that the council iwi relationship should be more business as usual. That this committee needs to keep a very close eye on to make sure that we have assurance that it's working. But the other two, the fraud processes and the IT processes, I see them as a little bit different in the investigation and the review that we need to provide. It doesn't lessen the importance of that, and I think that those policies need to be developed, and I think that has to happen. But from more of an internal audit perspective, which is my understanding of what we're kind of looking at here, I would absolutely agree with you that IT and fraud, for the reasons outlined, have to be the top priorities, but my expectation is that staff would still be prioritising and focusing on what Councillor Nye was looking for. I just wanted to make that comment.
Look, I don't disagree with you, Councillor Nye. But I think the issue for me is, right, the resources, the process that I think for IT, you would actually need a specialist IT person to be engaged as an external resource. Though, right, you'd have to book them in, get them scheduled, etc. Whereas the iwi relationship could actually be done more of an in-house, but no less of a priority. That's the way I see it, right? And that's why I was asking, the chief executive can then bring that back, how that is actually resourced, how all three of them will be actually resourced going forward to be confirmed in the November meeting.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, I would really like to hear how we are actually going to be working on our iwi relationship partnership, especially seeing what the program is going to be that we will be using, because we have been talking about that for a while, and to see that we're at the end of our triennium and it still hasn't been completed, I would like to see that that has been done before I actually leave, or that it is actually going to be in place by the end of the year. So if I hear that, if I can get some assurance that that will be a focus, I'd be happy with that.
Through you, Chair, I mean, I don't disagree with what anyone's saying here, and it's more about, we all know that there's work to be done, but where does it actually sit in terms of reporting that back? There's a number of sort of levers with this bit of work, and we go from our internal cultural competency program, which we're developing, largely orientated at staff, which increase our knowledge, but from a relationship perspective, we may rely on a couple of individuals that may not be here in 6 months or whatever, that we need to actually start addressing how we actually manage that through some sort of putting something in place where those can continue with the continuity that maybe individuals hold themselves. But also, we also got these relationships and documents, we've got all the legislation behind it, but nothing actually beats that personal and those sort of professional and personal relationships that individuals do create over time. So how we actually measure and bring that back, that's probably more of I think everyone around this table plus staff needs to be involved in how we build that competency. And as Councillor Chase mentioned, there's a lot of changes going on, and I think I totally agree with Scott, would love to have it as BAU, but there's been a lot of sort of disruptions for our iwi in terms of their relationship with the Crown, and councils can still be seen as part of that Crown relationship as well, and then obviously with the referendum coming up. So there's a lot of things happening, a lot of changes happening at the moment. So I think, sort of reiterating what you said, Chair Philip, that we'll have to look at bringing some plan back, just more than just our cultural competency program, whether or not, for example, we bring back the governance meetings before again, having the LTP elected at that. All of these are discussions that we've got to have with elected to agree on what you see as what you want in terms of that governance to governance relationship as well. From an operational point of view, it's happening as BAU largely, but will that change into the future, and how do we ensure that we've got that continuity going forward as well?
Page 203, take the report as read. Is there any key highlights you want to bring to and maybe provide a little bit of explanation? Thanks, Stephen. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. It's actually pretty straightforward, I think, this one. We've had the appetite back a few times to the committee now, and you can see the greyed out sections are ones that the committee have already reviewed. The final step was to get the executive leadership team to just let you know about any gaps between the risk appetite, as has already been through the committee, and where they see council is at now. And there are only a few very minor changes that the executive leadership team have recommended. So maybe if I just go quickly through those. So just on page 211, just highlighted in red, there's just a slight, a small addition in the risk statement about a focus on asset registers, condition and capacity information. So just fleshing that appetite out a little bit, but no change to the appetite itself. On page 214, with community relationships, after discussing with ELT, when we first wrote these statements, which was around a year ago, I think since then, what we're saying is our maturity in our community relationships has come a long way. I'm just recommending taking that 12.3 section out. The next one is page 215, our iwi partner relationships, which I think we've just canvassed quite extensively already. But we're just, so the suggestion is there that, as you can see from the graph, there's that tension between wanting a low risk appetite and having to operate or operating at a moderate risk appetite at the moment, which we've discussed already. The next one is page 216. We're just recommending adding Taumata Arawai in as a key stakeholder. And 219, just another deletion there because we're not looking at increasing our debt ceiling. And finally, the only other small change is page 222. Just to clarify the wording at 21.3. Other than that, there's no changes recommended. It's really just as we've already discussed with the committee.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. Could I just suggest on page 216, key stakeholder relationships, that the Wairarapa councils are added to that?
Yep.
I did, thanks Mr Chair. Just looking at 211, just in light of what we were talking about earlier with district planning, that page just needs a bit of a review. I don't think it changes the where we sit, but just thought I'd mention that. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to say, I mean, this is a big step forward in our maturity, is to have this appetite, and it's something we've been working on for a long time. This hasn't been formally rolled out to staff yet, but I do notice that it's already starting to have an impact on decisions and discussions at staff level about what our council is looking for, what the appetite is of council in different areas. So, you know, once we actually get to the next step, which is rolling this out to staff, you know, I think it will make, you know, we'll see some, this will come through in reporting, and we'll see some changes in the language and the decisions being made. It's going to be a really valuable tool.
Chair Phillip, first time. I was just looking at this. It was really just reflecting on the Councillor Nye's discussions about iwi. So from the register and setting them on the list, it's not really as if nothing's happening, because the iwi have been very active in the infrastructure areas they've been involved with all the roading decisions on a monthly basis, both iwi since Cyclone Gabriel, and significant decision making they've helped there. They've been on our water committee, that with our infrastructure, and maybe 3 water committee, which is still going, involved there, and they have been involved with all consents. So they have been very active in those areas, and I did think I'd make the comment, and the 2 iwi, or more than the 2 iwi, have a number of iwi members on those committees at times. Their comments have been to me, and perhaps Mayor Tracy too at times, that they're stretched with resources themselves, from their own points of view. They prefer to do things than turn up. They prefer to be involved. We've tried quite hard to involve in the early parts of this triennium, and then we've now had a decision where we go to Kahanuni, which has been quite positive. But it's not as if I just see the view. It's not if nothing's happening. There has been quite a lot happening. And if we were to take that to a different level, or setting a structure in place, that's so be it for the next council. But they have been very effectively and very prominent in the areas of BAU and infrastructure. So just really want to make a comment about that, actually. What we do going forward with that, I don't know.
Thank you. I totally agree with you, Kerry, but do you think if they lose that funding that they may not be able to be at the table as much as they are currently? Well, to help with the tile space. So so they may not be able to, because like you said, they are pretty stretched. So there needs to be probably a better relation. I'm not saying a better, but just something needs to be put in place so that relationship can continue.
So if we go back to page 203 and beginning of 204, we've got a series of recommendations there. Do we need to change anything? Nothing to be changed. So therefore, do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Carey. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Tracy. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Next item, 7.8, page 225, our assurance management report. Oh, thank you again, Stephen. Take it as read. Is there any highlights you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair Phillip. Yes, take it as read. I do have Roger and Peter here to speak to the direct debit and rates debtors sections. Other than that, I think I don't have any other things other than to take questions. Would you like to start with the direct debits?
All right, are there any? Well, Roger's coming forward. Peter's no, I thought he was sitting in the back row hiding there for a minute. I thought he was going to stay there. No? Are there any? No. Are there any? Oh, welcome to the table, Peter. Are there any questions of Roger or Peter or Stephen?
Thanks, Chair Phillip. I'll just kick it off with the first one. The outstanding emails, I just wondered if we can get a bit of a progress update of where we're at with that in tracking, just because I've had a couple pop up of late.
Mr Chair, Mayor Tracy, councillors, thanks for the opportunity. I think we've made some great progress in the emails, so we're turning the vast majority over within 24, 48 hours. There are still a number of legacy issues that we still need to resolve. But for example, I think in the last 2 months we've processed about 100 sales. So there's a lot of properties selling at the moment, and they're all coming in through that inbox. So the inbox has a significant amount of traffic, both internally and externally generated. But yeah, I think we've got much better visibility as to where we're at, definitely, in the last 6 months.
About 60 a day.
Yeah, probably anywhere between 40 to 60 a day, just depending on what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, the backlog that was there, what's the progress rate on those ones? I know you're keeping up, making good progress on the day-to-day, but there was a significant chunk there. Are we 3/4 the way through those, or?
I think we're down to the final ones. Me and Tracy, we've dealt with quite a few in the last 6 weeks prior to setting rates. So trying to get them resolved before rates are set in those 4 instalments. First instalment goes out. There's still a few that there was a couple of the more complicated ones that we've still got to finalise.
I know, like it's sort of getting 6 months in, and has anything gone back to those original emails to say that, you know, we are working through the backlog, because they've just had no communication? That's my understanding from speaking with them.
Really interested to know who they are, to be honest, because I've personally rung a number of people and advised them or communicated that we will be getting back to them and given them a timeline. So yeah, I'd be really interested to know in particular who those individuals are, and we can do that too, take exactly the same approach.
And thanks, Roger. I appreciate the report here. 2 things went through my mind, and it hasn't been summarised in this particular paper, but as I went through the table, there was a lot of slippage in the due dates. And we've used the word hindsight this morning quite a bit. In hindsight, in your view, now that you've had your feet under the table and you've been working in the weeds, in hindsight, what we'd plan to do by that due date, because some of those dates are almost 6 months apart. What have been the barriers or the bigger picture issues or the blockages that have meant we didn't hit that deadline and it's not till 6 months later? Or I guess I'm trying to find an overall summary of, heck, we've been trying to sort this out for this long. These were some of the bigger picture things that if we'd approached differently or had a different lens on it, we might have hit those dates differently. Trying to understand the framework within which we haven't been able to nail those objectives the way we did. My second question, which is a quick one, is Rebecca still involved or our external? Okay, that was an easy answer, that one.
Yeah, I think we're very optimistic initially, to be honest, and just the extent of the BAU work, especially over the last couple of months. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of legacy issues dating back a number of years that have had to be dealt with, and invariably they're complicated. That's why they've been outstanding. And so we've just been working through those one at a time. I think other priorities within council, especially around that whole HR side of things, has meant that essentially the review around that team and how that team's going to look moving forward is we're just sort of really getting into that now. And ideally we would have got into that earlier, but the team had other priorities, so we're just fitting that in. Yeah.
Thank you.
And sorry, in the debt management issue, I think that's significant. I feel that we're in a much better position right now. Hopefully you've seen that from Peter's report. We've got a much better understanding where we are, and now looking at specifically addressing those larger debtors in particular. But we have made some good progress. There's been a rating sale, for example. We've got another one on the 1st of August. We've got a number of abandoned land properties out there. It's definitely underway, but given the length of time, especially legally, for some of these activities to occur. It just does take time. And often people will come and they'll say, oh yeah, they'll set up a payment plan to buy themselves time, and then you never hear from them. So yeah. And Rebecca is still definitely involved. She's just helping us tidy up as we transition to the first instalment, just making sure we haven't missed anything. Because she's got a really good oversight, obviously, of what has happened, and also preparing us for this time next year, because we're going to have a number of things we're going to need to look at in detail. You know, who has cleared their arrears, who hasn't, that sort of detail, to make sure that we manage these individuals with the care that we need to.
We also have, the staff that are dedicated in the rates team. They're particularly trained in rates and our own policies and procedures that we have here at Tararua. So it is challenging. What we have experienced is that it is challenging to add additional resources into this because they don't have the skills and experience from the get-go. So it's something that we really have to train in-house. So I just wanted to add that to Roger's answer as to why there has been, some of those slippages.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Carey. Sorry?
I thought there was another hand going up. I'll just make a comment, Chair Philip. I've been probably mentioning the rates for a fair while now, and I really appreciate Sarah and Peter's work and the way this is presented today is what I've been quite keen to see for some time, actually. And it's been my view that, you know, apart from the sale of assets and other things, the handling of the debt of the council with rates is probably as important as anything on our list today, because it, you know, if we get back $1 million, that's 3 or 4% rates, and so there are significant financial benefits in making this a priority, and it's really pleasing to see that we sort of got back 82 grand more than we put this last period. So I think it's the shift to DMC is probably, and the real focus on catching up with some of those large debts. But this has given me an absolute picture of where we are, and I think there's benefits in investing a lot of time and effort in planning into this, because it won't, you know, we could spend a lot of money selling a bit of land up at Greek Street for a little low return, but it won't take much. Well, it will take some effort, but to get $1 million back off our outstanding rates here, we can all understand how things have gone with the graphs over the last 4 or 5 years, and we wouldn't be the only council with that, I don't think, but it's, at least we know where we are and what's ahead of us, and there's some focus. And this is the first time really, I think, that I've seen that and felt okay about it. You know, at least we've got a plan, and we can see some changes and some movement. So.
Yeah, so I think 7.4 was quite illustrative to me in terms of what information that you might like to know, and that's the spread, how many ratepayers and how much they total. And you can see we could focus on 284 ratepayers, which is reasonably achievable, and work at them, and you reduce their outstanding debt by 78%. The risk to council of that is that we budget $400,000 a year for penalties, and we may not meet that target. Now, that's a good thing, because this is the group of ratepayers that are least able to pay usually. So I think the fact that we're making provisions each year for write-off helps buffer that to some extent. So in the year that we're talking, we made a technical revenue surplus, but the reality of that is most of it will be written off at some point. And that's what we've got to take care about in terms of that budgeting process around what the penalty amount, what a reasonable penalty amount is. The best we ever achieved in terms of our debtor balance was, I think, 65,000. 95,000 was our lowest ever balance of all of our outstanding debtors. What you can work if you work hard at it. At that point, you're making very little on penalty, I have to say. So, and here's the other thing, is that that debtor balance is building up directly because of penalty. So those on arrears, those who have payments, arrear balances, they will end up being charged 20% for the year on top of their balance. That accumulates hugely. There is one ratepayer that owes over 250,000 currently. Just so you know. So dealing with that one difficult property, and we've got 17 that, I think it's 11, 11, sorry. Yep, 11 that are technically abandoned. In other words, we have no idea where the landowner is. And so they are not traceable. So they go through eventually an abandoned land process and their properties are sold. So we can target those. It doesn't need to be a DMC thing. It's just a process. But so when we look back in those targets where we say we're going to transfer all of our debt to DMC, that may not be the wisest solution in all instances, because there is a cost to using DMC as well. So I just warn you of that, I would act judiciously in terms of what is transferred across and what is kept. But I can give you a list of all 10,500 ratepayers right now and their balances. And I know which ones are with DMC. I know what DMC is doing with those right now, and well, as of last week. And we're going to sharpen that process, working in with them as to how that's managed.
I'm impressed. Could you please give me the info on 17 Redfern Street?
I probably could.
That is in one of your little... Audaciously. I love that word, audaciously. 17 Redfern Street, are we allowed to know the answer? No? But anyhow, but that's what I mean. So if we can get this, it's good, because then we can go forward.
All right, thank you. Any more questions on the debtors and the rest of the report? We're focused on the debtors bit. I'm going to go up the tree a little bit.
Sorry, I had one minor correction. Yeah, the chair. When our system says rebates, they're actually remissions. So I have got that the wrong way round. It's an Australian system thing.
Once, right? Any further questions? I've got just, this has got, I'm pleased you spoke up, Peter, because this has got your name against it, right? On page 227, we're pushing out a couple of the implementation of the one-ups from June to September. Is September realistic?
What number? 6 point?
It's in the table of open audit recommendations. Oh, it's Sarah. Oh, it's got on page 227.
That item is we need ESCA, our accounts payable software provider, to do a bit of work behind the scenes to allow us to implement it. Once they've completed that, Gavin and Denise will be the ones to test that. I'm not sure whether we're at the point of being able to test yet, but other priorities have diverted Gavin, the rates graphs, for instance, and us getting our annual report system. So it is, September is achievable as far as I know, and if it's not, we will report back.
We report back in November whether you've achieved it or not, just to be a little bit... All right, and the last one, so Sarah doesn't feel alone, all right? Next page over, Hamish has got the RAM update is in progress. It'd be nice to know, do you have an estimated completion date at the next meeting, Hamish? Right? Thank you. Are there any further questions? So if we go back to the recommendation, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Steve, do I have a seconder? Councillor Mike. All those in favour, please say aye. Next item is a health Safety and Wellbeing Management Report on page 243, 7.9. Been waiting a very long time.
We'll take this as read. There's a few things in there, but I think we'll take questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. Just in regards to the due diligence work that we undertook in Pahiatua, I guess I've just noted that there were some significant concerns raised, and in 6.10, you know, those meaningful improvements can be made with the program section 17A review that we've just lost. So I guess it's just highlighting that and what the plan might be and addressing some of those in a more prioritised way. And I understand the 17As only have just happened.
Through you, Chair Phillip. So thank you for the question, Mayor Tracy. So in terms of the Pahiatua transfer station, we need to do a bit of work to determine the options there, which will form probably a long-term plan decision. In the meantime, I mean, the 17A work is still worth seeing through. It's still decisions that will need to be made as part of the long-term plan. It helps form the asset management plan, activity management plan that will be that will go towards that LTP. So it's all useful. It's certainly not a waste of time by any means. And we're hoping that we can do the first part of that, the Pahiatua transfer station decision, before the end of the calendar year, but it's really officer time dependent, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Gillian, thanks for all the work on the report, and Stephen. It's a really good report. So I'm not going to go into all of the detail. It's nice and laid out. What I did want to ask about, though, which will probably come as no surprise, is page 253, number 11, the Get Home Safe app deep dive, which has been an area that I've been raising and asking about in a number of committees and also offline. Really grateful to see the deep dive, although I found it somewhat alarming when I had a read, to be frank, particularly when it has been raised a number of times and now we discover that it's not a policy requirement for staff to be using it, and also that there is a disconnect in understanding of whether someone is a remote worker or not a remote worker. So that's a bit concerning, and I would have hoped that some of that was understood earlier, as it had been raised a number of times. Can I get a bit of an understanding, though, of what is the practical plan to address that? We know that we have a potential risk there. We know that we have a tool that's not being used. We now know that it's not a policy requirement. My understanding is that could still be a reasonable direction given by a manager to ask staff to use it. But remote workers or lone, that is a real apparent risk to us that I'm keen to make sure we're adequately using technology, but making sure that our employees are safe. So I'd just like a little bit more information, now that we know this, what the plan is to fill those gaps, please.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Yes, completely agree, and those are fair comments. It's definitely been a lessons learned process as Gillian's done this deep dive. What we thought we understood, we didn't. And it's quite, so to put your mind at ease, the other thing, to some degree, the other thing we found is all of our teams have processes and ways to keep tabs on their staff. And our managers and our team leaders do take that responsibility seriously. So we did find that in the teams that we've talked to, there are, a myriad of ways that people are doing this already, but not necessarily using the tool. The other thing that we have noticed is that the trend of use continues to go up. So we are getting more people using it more often.
89 from May and 104.
Yeah, so for example, our May stat was up again at 89. In June, we're now at 104 users. So yeah, the numbers are going up. And to me, when I was thinking about what is a lone and remote worker, to me, there's an obvious answer. But for all of the different things that we do in council across multiple industries and different roles, what we found is that the answer is not clear to everyone what a lone or remote worker is, because they may be a lone worker one day or one trip a week, or they may be somebody that is always alone out on the road, and there is just a myriad of differences in between. Some of our managers understood that lone and remote refers to not being in an urban area. So it's so assumptions made in the rollout of the policy have led to where we are now. So what we do have is some recommendations that we're going to take to ELT this month about improving the policy and the rollout process to really get this nailed. Some of the things will be to simplify it by requiring Get Home Safe to be used in some circumstances, and others where it can be an optional part of a suite of things. That's kind of the general gist of it, I think, is where we're. Is that reasonable? Yeah.
I think I know the answer. On page 251, 8.2, WorkSafe was satisfied with council's response. However, at time of writing, we're yet to complete their review into the investigation. Is that likely to change the outcome, or are we just biding our time until we get the document?
I think it's a fair question through the chair. So in terms of the WorkSafe directive, what they've said is that they've closed that directive off as us having met the directive requirements, which is that we report incidents to them promptly after they occur. They're satisfied that we now have processes in place to do that. They still have asked for a copy of the investigation, and they're just going to look at it. I haven't had any feedback from them that they have any concerns about how we investigated and what our recommendations are, but I just haven't heard back from them yet. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, got some questions, but I have it, and won't go into them now. I'll talk to you later, Stephen. So if any further questions? So we've got a recommendation there on page 243. Do I have a mover? Councillor Scott. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Steve. All right. All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Next item, 7.10, the draft training and work program. You're sitting very quietly, Sandy. Take your report as. Do you want to explain this, or just
I can
take it as? Yep.
Yeah, I can take the report as read, but just essentially what I've tried to do here is align our training and work program with some of the maturity changes that we've seen throughout this training and formalise that for the new training. I note also that the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee will endeavour to seek your feedback separately to this process, which may also give me some information about items for inclusion or removal. So happy to take any feedback now or leave that to be done through that process.
Thank you for that segue. So what I was going to do, I've written a note just before we close. What I am proposing to do is send all the elected members a little survey. Come back to me. I will summarise that, and then I will report back to the chief executive, right? And with recommendations and potentially the new mayor, right? Whoever that may be. once as part of the triennium. So that will be coming to an inbox near you in probably 3 or 4 weeks' time. I just need a bit of capacity. I'm just running out of capacity at the moment. But it's a standard question I've used before. I've used this process for other councils, and then I present a report and then give a briefing to the incoming as to what the recommendations are. So it basically forms your views, but also my views as well. So if you're comfortable with that, I'm not asking you for permission, I'm just giving you a heads up it's coming. All right? That's what Sandy was referring to. Are there any questions for Sandy on the work program? My only comment would be this would have to be then approved by the new committee and also reviewed on a month by month, a meeting by meeting basis, what actually happens next. Questions? A report with no questions? My goodness, you did well, Sandy. Right? Okay. So we've got a recommendation there on page 259. Do I have a mover? I'll move. Seconded, Councillor Mike. Oh, sorry, Councillor Allison sitting down there. Maybe you should, right? Maybe. So, yeah, all right. All right, any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. As against closing. So in closing, just want to wish, this is the last formal meeting of this committee, just want to wish everyone who is standing all the very best. Right? I can't say good luck because maybe it's luck, I don't know. And for those who are not standing, all the best for the future. Thank you. Closing karakia. I'll leave it. I've got another meeting, yes, and you've got 6 minutes before your next, 7 meetings before your next meeting. Thank you very much for your spirited bidding. Thank you.